I become the Demon King in Marvel. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 276, Pacifists are bringing precious peace to Tokyo residents. Arriving from the sea, the eternal speedster Makuri looked up and saw a massive tree piercing the sky. Deaf and mute, she opened her mouth, only to utter an incomprehensible cry. When did something like this appear on Earth? I've lived on Earth for over 7,000 years, and how come I've never seen one before? Makuri thought she'd only lived one lifetime, but she didn't know that every time a celestial descendant was successfully conceived, she and her companions' memories were wiped clean and they were sent back to the next mission. The Eternals have lived for countless years, and the very word eternal signifies a perpetual fate of being used as tools. Of course, this secret is currently unknown to everyone except Captain Ajak and Tina, who has accidentally awakened her past memories. They all believe their mission on Earth is to eliminate the mutants and protect the Earth's native inhabitants. However, a program embedded in their genes forces them to care for the safety of the celestial descendant deep within the Earth's core. This is clearly another trick left by the adult Celestials. Whenever the nascent Celestials encountered a mortal threat, the Eternals, their tools, would be compelled to investigate and eliminate the threat. However, over 7,000 years ago, the adult Celestials could never have imagined Earth would undergo such transformations. Director, an unidentified transcendent has been spotted, the observer inside the ring fortress immediately reported to Zheng Xian. Zheng Xian, entering the central control room from his office, glanced at the speedster Makuri appearing on the large screen, but dismissed him. Ignore him. Land as planned, eliminate the demons, and save the residents of Tokyo, Zheng Xian said with a righteous expression, as if completely unaware of the cause of Tokyo's current plight. Indeed, SHIE was now the good guys, the saviors. The ring fortress opened its hatch and, just as it had before in Wakanda, released a large number of pacifist robots. Small transport ships then leaped out and flew towards the districts of Tokyo. The sudden appearance of the ring fortress alarmed the surviving residents of Tokyo and also alerted other nations on Earth. Aside from Big Mao, who already had a partial understanding of SHIE's true potential, other nations, including the United States, were stunned by its power, and a sense of threat followed. The World Security Council's meeting room turned on a large screen, ready to observe SHIE's efforts to quell the Tokyo riots. However, unexpectedly, SHIE's 3 helicarriers hadn't arrived yet, while the warm-hearted SHIE arrived first. Is this the aviation equipment you were talking about? The American representative demanded, pointing to the ring-shaped fortress on the screen. The Asian representative replied, "Isn't this aviation equipment?" X3 Big Mao secretly rejoiced at the defeat of the 3 Atlantic nations. Soon, they witnessed a pacifist robots unleashing their might. The 6 or 7 meter tall pacifists were already intimidating, but after firing yellow lasers from their mouths and palms, the 3 Atlantic nations were once again silenced. These are all robots, without drivers. After all, our technology is still so backward that we can't produce external armor, the Asian man explained with a hint of regret. X3, please. The technological content of these intelligent robots is no less than that of exoskeleton armor, right? They're called pacifists, and they embody our country's hope for world peace. They will surely become the backbone of protecting that peace, the Asian man said emotionally. Look, they're bringing precious peace to the residents of Tokyo. X3, please, stop talking. I won't be able to eat breakfast tomorrow. After the SHIE arrived, the demons and monsters began the pre-exit performance according to the script. After being hit by the lasers, each one showed signs of being severely injured, then uttered a few harsh words and turned and fled. The model employee, the fire demon, was dedicated to his work to the end. Damn ants, how dare you hurt me? Pillars of fire shot towards the pacifists, but they couldn't even penetrate their skin, leaving only charred marks. Lock on target, fire. The pacifists raised their heads and fired a barrage of lasers at the fire spirit-like creatures in the sky. With a resounding boom, the fire spirits were blasted to pieces. I won't give up, still putting on a show? We'll miss our midnight snack. Blood Demon quickly packed up the drama queen and fled into the ruins of Tokyo, teleporting away. Under the relentless bombardment of the pacifist robots, the giant phantoms of demons and monsters were damaged and vanished. Some retreated immediately, while others fought back a few times before departing as a show of resistance. 3 SWORD helicarriers were still en route, but the chaos in Tokyo was surprisingly calming. Are laser weapons the only thing that can harm these extraordinary creatures? The onlookers speculated. Previously, the island nation's self-defense forces and the fungus fighter jets had been completely ineffective against these demons, but the SWORD robots were surprisingly effective. It seemed likely that after tonight, weapons research and development departments around the world would receive a significant amount of funding and begin fully pursuing the standardization of laser weapons. When they achieve something, the demons and monsters will show them what acting really means. This brief, intense battle caught the eye of the speedster Macquarie, and the alien was startled once more. Is this Earth? Are these Earthlings? Since the split of the Eternal centuries ago, the members have scattered across the globe, each beginning their own lives. Some have become movie stars, their families passing down generations of only male descendants, all with the same appearance. Others have retreated to secluded wildernesses, seemingly inaccessible and desolate, yet their refrigerators are stocked with fresh vegetables, milk, and drinks that never expire. Even more adventurous, some have married a woman with a son and become fathers. Macquarie, the speedster, is a homebody, having never left their ship for centuries. However, while confined to his ship, he leverages his speedster abilities to frequently travel the globe, collecting specialties from around the world, free of charge. Compared to his more reclusive teammates, Macquarie has been keeping a close eye on the development of human civilization over the years. But she'd never seen such a formidable robot before. Honestly, with a pacifist's combat prowess, even within the Eternals, it couldn't defeat Icarus, the Superman copycat, or the supposedly immensely powerful Gilgamesh. Even Athena, known as the goddess of war, would have to fight her to prove it. As for the others, their combat prowess certainly couldn't match that of the pacifist robots, so it's no wonder Macquarie was shocked. Do humans like these really need the protection? No, I have to go inform everyone. A powerful compulsion within Macquarie drove her to the sacred tree and destroy it. It was a program left behind by the Celestials, influencing her consciousness. But this generation of Eternals was destined to be the worst the Celestials had ever managed. Every member was a traitor, each with their own agenda. For example, Macquarie was secretly in love with her teammate, Druid. Hundreds of years ago, when the world split, the Druids went to South America and built a utopia. They used their superpower of mental control to force the humans living there not to have violent thoughts and to love each other for their whole lives. Macquarie discovered a village built by the Druids many years ago, but she was shy by nature and only dared to hide in the dark to peek at her sweetheart. She didn't dare to stand up, let alone express her love. But today is different. What happened suddenly on the Earth was beyond their control, and they had to notify their teammates to be prepared. So, Macquarie overcame the hint in his heart, violated the established procedures of the Celestials, abandoned the young Celestials who were suffering, and turned around to rush to the South American continent. Deep underground, the roots of the sacred tree penetrated into the heart of the Celestials, wantonly extracting energy from him. At the top of the sacred tree high in the sky, a purple fruit is gradually taking shape. Chapter 274 Entering the small dark room again. Chapter 277 The fruit ripened, the Eternals appeared. On Mars, in the Heavenly Palace, on the 33rd floor, the Tushita Palace. Whitebeard's Ancient One and Wu Fengji awaited there. Wu Fengji, clutching the spear of Imhotep, surveyed the outer space with an air of eager anticipation. Once the Celestials on Earth were destroyed, the adult Celestials from the universe would undoubtedly rush to investigate. Although the adult Celestials didn't appear until the very end of the film Eternals, seemingly arriving late due to a long journey, they clearly utilized space technology to reach Earth in a flash and vanish with a traitor just as quickly. As a precaution, Lin Hao dispatched Ancient One and Wu Fengji with a spear to await them at the Heavenly Palace on Mars before the Divine Tree bore fruit. The Divine Tree was rapidly absorbing the energy of the young Celestials, and the chakra fruit was thriving. I wonder if this fruit will have some unique abilities, Lin Hao said, guarding the Earth's core to prevent the young Celestials from launching a final counterattack. This guy's hiding on Earth was always a threat. If it weren't for him serving as fertilizer for the sacred tree, Lin Hao would have killed him with his editing privileges long ago. The SWORD team was much slower than the speedster Macquarie, who had already circled Earth and back, and 3 helicarriers hadn't even reached Tokyo. Arriving in the South American rainforest, Macri quickly found her secret crush, Druid, and voluntarily released her memories, revealing the events in Tokyo. Druid, intent on stopping the people of Earth from killing each other and achieving world peace, was driven by a deep inner compulsion to pay attention to the events in Tokyo. He immediately used his powers to contact his teammates. Druid's superpower was mind control, but it was far inferior to Professor Ball's, unable to extend it worldwide. However, to allow their tool to communicate in an emergency, in addition to the speedster acting as a messenger, Druid, who possessed mind control, was also granted the ability to contact the other team members at any time. Otherwise, what if a major incident occurred while the tools were separated, preventing them from communicating and arriving? Would that be years of effort wasted? Thus, the Eternals, scattered around the world, simultaneously received news of the events in Tokyo. Icarus, who copied Superman's design, immediately departed for Tokyo without hesitation. Using his druid powers, their leader, Ajak, commanded the speedster, Macri, go to Tina and Gilgamesh first and deliver them there. Then come back to pick me up. Circe and King will follow, and Phastos and the druids will follow. After hearing Macri's description of the riots in Tokyo, Ajak realized that force was the only solution, so he sent his strongest members there first. As time passed, the celestials in the depths of the earth gradually ceased to stir. The sudden earthquakes, volcanic eruptions, and tsunamis that had erupted across the land gradually subsided, their sources gone. The chakra fruit atop the sacred tree was about to ripen. Meanwhile, satellites from various nations were focused on Tokyo on the suddenly appearing giant tree, naturally noticing the strange fruit. I believe there's something wrong with this fruit. We must take it back and study it thoroughly, the American representative, observing the unfolding events, unfailingly expressed greed in his eyes. Unfortunately, the Sword's aerospace carrier was still en route, while the SHIP's ring-shaped fortress hovered beside the sacred tree. Seeing the unrest in Tokyo gradually subside, the Japanese-based mold suddenly dispatched its most advanced transport planes, heading straight for the summit of the sacred tree. Upon receiving the news, representatives from the three nations in the World Security Council chamber angrily denounced the Americans. What does mold want? You're invisible during the battle, yet so eager to seize things, Big Hair roared in his face. Your country's actions are truly despicable. England had completely abandoned his position as a subordinate. They wanted this clearly unusual fruit too. After a furious glare, the Gallic rooster immediately turned his gaze to the newly ascended leader, trying to get them to do something. After all, SHIP's aerospace fortress was nearby and had already demonstrated its formidable combat capabilities. It's not impossible to use this opportunity to start a fight. After all, everyone on Earth knows that the new boss and the old boss will clash sooner or later, it's just a matter of when and how. However, the Asian face remained indifferent, a hint of a sneer playing on his lips. The complacent American representative, upon seeing this sneer, felt a pang of fear in his heart and quickly turned to look at the big screen. On the screen, he saw a mold transport plane flying over the top of the sacred tree, attempting to lower its cutting equipment to harvest the chakra fruit in advance. Suddenly, a huge white nine-tailed fox appeared in the night sky, its nine tails flaring wildly in the bright moonlight. In a flash of white light, one of the white fox's tails crashed into the mold plane, igniting a ball of flames. The Americans in front of the screen were stunned for a moment. How could that be? In Chinese mythology, every natural treasure is guarded by powerful creatures, the Asian-looking man in the conference room explained calmly. Good things take time to grow. During this long growth period, countless creatures are attracted to them. The fact that they can be discovered by humans, rather than being trampled upon by some ants, insects, and rats, indicates that powerful creatures are waiting for them to mature. Upon hearing this, some of the ants, insects, and rats blushed, but couldn't react. No wonder the SHIE fortress turned a blind eye. The others suddenly realized something. Are they deliberately waiting for the mold to step on the minefield? Quite possibly. Since it's agreed that the five nations will jointly control Tokyo, then this fruit must be divided equally among the five, adhering to the principle of ensuring that no one else can have it all to themselves. The American began to emphasize the resolution they hadn't voted for. Sorry, I'm just a diplomat. The SHIE and I are not on the same team. The Asian-looking man threw up his hands, unable to offer any assistance. Besides, with a nine-tailed fox waiting nearby, The director of the SUALD might not sacrifice his colleagues to seize the fruit. If you have any ideas about this fruit, you can send your own men to seize it, he added lightly. The nine-tailed fox is a powerful yokai. If some insects, rats, and ants destroy its fruits, it will likely hunt them down. With these words, the Americans retreated from their desperate attempts to launch missiles to destroy the fruit. Washington had just been ravaged by the octopus monster. New York must not be harmed again. As Icarus of the Eternals flew over Tokyo and Makuri brought Tina to him, the Celestials deep within the Earth's core were completely decimated, their energy drained by the sacred tree, and the chakra fruit finally matured. Nyon, who was waiting nearby, personally plucked the fruit and vanished before Icarus's eyes. Reaching the summit of the sacred tree, Icarus knew little about either the tree or the nine-tailed fox he had just glimpsed. As an eternal warrior, not a scholar, he had little understanding of Earth's indigenous culture. Yet, a throbbing heart compelled him to destroy the massive tree towering over Tokyo. He immediately fired golden rays from his eyes, attempting to cut through the tree. Unexpectedly, the tree sprang to life. Thick roots rose from the ground, shrinking into 10 sturdy tails. A slit suddenly opened within the bud at the top of the trunk, revealing a large, crimson eye with whorls and 9 black magatama beads in its pupil. The mere glance of this massive eye sent Icarus flying in the sky, repelling him. Chapter 278 The 10 Tails Having Fun on Honshu Island. Ajak, the leader of the Eternals, who had just been transported by the speedster, saw his most formidable warrior sent flying by a glare. He cried out in shock, "Icarus, what kind of monster is this?" Gilgamesh, a strongman resembling a Southern Dynasty gangster, gazed at the sacred tree, which stood over 15,000 meters tall, exclaiming in disbelief. "A new mutant, cut it open and you'll find out." Tina, whose memory had just recovered, drew a lightsaber and charged at the 10 tails, the tree's manifestation. Her speed was impressive, and she aimed at a thick tail, leaped into the air, and swung her sword across. The lightsaber, a blend of magic and technology, struck the root-like tail, but only penetrated halfway, failing to sever it. The 10 tails' tail's resilience and strength far exceeded the alien's expectations. The wounded 10 tails immediately struck back, its 2 stubby roots suddenly transforming into human hands. Both palms reached out and struck a wide-mouthed beauty, Tina. Gilgamesh, her unwavering soulmate, raised his fist to meet the 10 tails' palms. A resounding roar, like a cosmic collision, pierced the eardrums of the surviving Tokyo residents, wiping out their last shreds of consciousness and sending them careening backwards into the streets. The shockwave ripped through the surrounding debris, sending shattered buildings flying. Honestly, the infinite strength setting was truly impressive, at least surpassing the Superman-like power displayed by Icarus. He forcibly forced the 10 tails' legs outward. 2 thick roots transformed into the 10 tails' legs, and the towering trunk began to shrink. The buds at its summit closed, eventually becoming a screw shell on its back. After switching states, the 10 tails took on a human form. Though only 100 meters tall and lacking the imposing presence of the original sacred tree, it possessed 2 arms, 2 legs, and a ferocious head. 2 rows of snow-white teeth, perfectly aligned and tightly packed together, made one wonder what kind of toothpaste it used. Within its single eye, unobstructed by the trees, nestled a large scarlet eye, its pupil adorned with whorls and 9 black magatama beads. Facing the tiny creature, which had forced it back a few steps with its sheer strength, the 10 tails was polite, offering a greeting. Its maw opened, and between its 2 rows of white teeth, a purple and red orb suddenly appeared. This orb was clearly something special. Gilgamesh, a powerful warrior resembling a Southern Dynasty gangster, struck first, only to be pelted in the face by the orb. A mushroom cloud suddenly rose from the ruins of Tokyo. When the smoke cleared, a massive crater at least 10 kilometers in diameter remained. The muscular Gilgamesh fell heavily to the bottom, his body charred and unconscious, yet no visible injuries were visible. His tissues were far harder and more resilient than those of ordinary humans and most other Eternals. He was supposedly enduring, practically mortal. The Celestials deep within the Earth's core were dead. Lin Hao returned to the plane and, as he soared out of the atmosphere, watched the live broadcast of the Eternals' battle against the 10 tails. So tough? How did they collapse so quickly in the movie, boss? We got the stuff back. Nguyen appeared in the cabin, holding a purple fruit at least 50 or 60 meters tall. If Lin Hao hadn't already used various techniques to expand the space in his plane, it wouldn't have been possible to fit it in. How did Kaguya Otsutsuki swallow such a large fruit? Lin Hao gazed at the enormous chakra fruit, unable to help but be curious. Can she handle it? The Otsutsuki clan likely had specialized methods for digesting the fruit and extracting its energy, but Lin Hao didn't know any of them, so he resorted to the crude method: 3 bites, 1 pig. To prevent energy loss, Lin Hao activated a protective shield constructed from spirit particles, spiritual energy, magic, and technology to enclose himself and the chakra fruit. Then, using the life return technique, he opened his mouth as wide as possible and devoured the absurdly large fruit, bite by bite. After more than 10 minutes of frantic activity, Lin Hao finally swallowed the fruit and absorbed all the chakra that had escaped. A moment later, a white hori appeared on Lin Hao's body, embroidered with a magatama on the chest and a black and white yin-yang tai chi diagram on the back. 9 black spheres floated behind him, and his eyes opened and closed, revealing a pair of Rinnegan. How do you like it? Lin Hao spun around in front of Yuan and asked with a hint of pride, is this a handsome look? Yes, Yuan said weakly. Do you want to tell the truth? Lin Hao was silent for a moment, then glared at her. You have no taste, but it's really ugly, Yuan muttered. It's out of place. What I'm wearing is called youth, understand? Lin Hao declared that he was a human being and shouldn't argue with a vixen. The moment he digested the fruit, Lin Hao gained the special abilities of the Rinnegan, allowing him to drive a Gundam and possess multiple bloodline-enhancing abilities. In terms of destructive power alone, several offensive abilities barely rival the first stage Super Saiyan's Kigen Wave, certainly no match for Super Saiyan 4. However, the ability to easily open a dimensional gap with Yokibiri Asuka on target living creatures with Gongshahugu allows Lin Hao to diversify his combat style. Furthermore, he possesses his own unique Rinnegan ability. Previously, Lin Hao was a relatively simple warrior, relying at best on apparition from mobility and Avada Kedavra to target souls. As for Iron Armor Curse, its defensive power was no match for the fur on his body. Binding Deo was somewhat useful, but requiring recharge before each use was a hassle. He was still learning the Shushan cultivation techniques, but still had some distance to go before achieving immortality. Crucially, immortal beings were fundamentally different from humans, involving immortality and transcendence. The power of the time baggage was incapable of allowing Lin Hao to capture a clear vision of the future. Without a reference point, he couldn't activate the perspective cheat, and his cultivation speed plummeted. Frankly, Lin Hao didn't believe his aptitude for cultivation was comparable to that of the cunningly Xiaoyao. Eastern fantasy cultivation emphasized understanding, and enlightenment was the key to transcendence. Fortunately, Lin Hao, with his abundant dragon essence, had a long lifespan, giving him ample time to cultivate his understanding. As Lin Hao soared out of the atmosphere, familiarizing himself with his abilities, the 10 tails on the ground ran amok on Honshu Island. Stop it! As the Eternals were brought to the battlefield one by the speedsters, their leader, Ajak, took command. We can't let it continue its destructive activities. Despite the 10 tails' strange appearance, the Eternals considered it a unique mutant. Their destiny to come to Earth was to destroy the mutants and protect humanity, so they interpreted the trembling in their hearts as a call to duty, a summons to come and destroy the 10 tails. The logic and goal were sound, absolutely flawless. Even if Alisum, the Supreme Celestial who created them, were present, there would be no reason to complain. However, the young Celestials deep within the Earth's core were truly dead. Icarus, the little Superman who had been flung away, flew back and finally shot 2 golden beams of energy at the 10 tails, but they were blocked by his nimble tail. A small section of the tail exploded, and the 10 tails roared, repairing it in the blink of an eye, then unleashed a massive tailed beast ball. Scatter, Ajak shouted at Icarus in midair. Gilgamesh, the thickest-skinned and most defensive of them all, was not unconscious by the terrifying 2-colored ball. Anyone else would have been instantly destroyed if they had been hit. Icarus flew away effortlessly, and the 2-colored ball flew straight, hitting a distant airfield. A massive mushroom cloud rose, and this time the tailed beast ball was clearly even more powerful than before. The American representative in the World Security Council meeting was stunned. Are you kidding me? He immediately pulled out his phone and called his authorized contact in China, but the call was unresolved. Contact with Yokota Air Base, the headquarters of the U.S. military in Japan, was lost. The representatives of the other 4 countries quickly pursed their lips and inhaled forcefully through their noses. They had all received professional training, so they couldn't laugh out loud. Mr. John, I suggest that your country immediately issue a statement stating that the personnel currently engaged in combat with the monsters have nothing to do with Britain, the Asian-looking man suddenly suggested. Huh? The British representative was stunned, then suddenly realized, okay, I'll report right away. Chapter 279 Why do monsters always oppose America? Eternals are a diverse group of people, black, white, and yellow, all speaking fluent English. Besides the British, only the Americans fit this description. British Representative John assumed that Chinese Representative Hao was kindly warning them to avoid the Americans, who would then go on a rampage. In fact, 2 Eternals women had obtained British citizenship, settled in London, and even become professors. This was actually a tip from the SHIE, though Representative Hao was unaware of the purpose of the warning. Could it be that they were worried the Japanese would choose the wrong target for revenge? But with a mold father looming over them, would the Japanese have the guts to seek revenge? Soon, Representative Hao realized his suspicions were proving true. The Ten Tails, now roaming freely on Honshu Island, had destroyed another mold base. While the Japanese cities were also destroyed, the mold bases were always targeted. No way, Representative Hao exclaimed in disbelief. How did the Spear Bureau do that? This is truly delightful. Even before Lin Hao threw the branch of the sacred tree, he had already used the tree's growth to summon the Ten Tails consciousness and sign the contract. Now Lin Hao's summoned beast, the Ten Tails naturally had to complete its boss's mission. No, the American representative's defense was broken, leaping from his seat and screaming hysterically, "Why does this damn monster keep opposing America? Sky Sword Bureau, where are the Sky Sword people? Why haven't they arrived yet?" Fortunately, he still retained a last shred of sanity and didn't ask the nearby Spear Bureau to rescue the mold base. If the old Pentagon still existed, perhaps there would be a slight chance that they would sympathize with the slain soldiers and request assistance. But now America is directly controlled by a hidden consortium. They don't care about the number of casualties, but rather the reaction of the financial markets. If they ask for help from the SHIE today, the global media will trumpet the story that America's military strength is no longer sufficient to maintain its world hegemony, that it's so fragile it needs military aid from Eastern powers to preserve its own military. Once this news spreads, American hegemony and the American financial system, built on the petrodollar economy, will collapse. U.S. stock indices will plummet, countless people will go bankrupt and jump from buildings, and America will most likely return to the Great Depression. At this critical juncture, with the advent of gods and demons, does the U.S. dare to allow itself to suffer a depression? That would be a sign of doom. The Japanese, stationed in Japan, can only rely on themselves. Yes, risking their own heads to resist the tailed beast ball. On Honshu Island, the battle between the Eternals and the Ten Tails continues. As the battle progresses, these veterans, averaging over 7,000 years old, gradually discover that the monster is leading them everywhere. Occasionally, they unleash a powerful double-colored ball, blowing up a section of Honshu's urban area. A closer look reveals that the bombs are exclusively targeting wealthier industrial areas, with remarkable precision. Only by destroying the Japanese's illusions about technology can we force these enraged extremists into the arms of the great nine-tailed fox. Nyon can then establish the new ninja sect in the island nation and become the forefather of a new generation of chakra masters. And to hell with Otsutsuki Haguramo's love and peace slogans. The new ninja sect's motto is revenge. Ajik, the monster seems intent on leading us to destroy this country's cities, Tina said, approaching the leader. Indeed, this monster doesn't seem completely irrational at all. Ajik frowned, turning to the shortest, impish-looking water spirit and shouting, "Aren't you ready for your jinjutsu yet?" The previous assault had been ineffective. The Ten Tails, part biological and part plant, was essentially a mass of chakra, impervious to conventional means unless they possessed ninjutsu or senjutsu that blended natural energy and chakra. Therefore, the group pinned their hopes on jinjutsu. The water spirit, seemingly a Lolita but actually having lived for countless years, cast a long-prepared jinjutsu at the Ten Tails. The next moment, she began stripping off her clothes, posing and dancing erotically, calling out the name of her crush, the handsome man Icarus. The scene was truly jarring. X9, Icarus shouted, his face scorched, as he floated in the sky, yelling at his ex-girlfriend. Having lived with the water spirits for centuries, Cersei had never imagined this little brat had hidden so much knowledge and techniques from her. The yellow-skinned Cersei complained innocently, "She's not a real brat, what the hell? You still have time to worry about her education, Tina shouted. This monster's illusion abilities are even stronger than the water spirits. The strongman Gilgamesh, who had initially been blinded by a tailed beast ball, had returned to the battlefield, his body charred as he stood guard over his soulmate. I'll try to hold it back. Circe, can you turn it to stone? The strongman shouted. Circe can control the transformation of matter, effortlessly breaking the boundary between organic and inorganic matter and transforming at will. At the end of the film, she transforms the emerging celestials into a massive stone, saving the Earth. My power alone might not be enough, Circe confesses. It's too big. I can't handle it. Her ex-boyfriend, Icarius, suddenly feels offended. Let's do it. Aja quickly agrees to the plan and orders his teammates. Phastos and Gilgamesh will restrain the monster's movements. King and Icarius will direct the monster's attention. The rest of us will share power with Circe. The Eternals have a unique feature that allows them to transfer energy between members, concentrating the energy of multiple teammates into a single person. Apparently, their creators were concerned that their tools would be insufficiently powered when faced with a formidable foe. As they busied themselves with the Ten Tails, a sudden dimensional fluctuation appeared in outer space. Here they come, Ancient One Whitebeard was the first to notice. Wu Fengji, clutching the spear of Imhotep, abruptly rose to her feet. Suddenly, an immense, red, humanoid creature appeared out of thin air in space near Earth. It drifted through space, its length from head to toe spanning the diameter of the Earth. A single punch could pierce the Earth's core. Send me over quickly. I want to test this spear, Wu Fengji said eagerly. If I can truly defeat the Celestials, I'll immediately search for the divine spear from my universe when I return. Wait a minute. You won't last long in this universe, Ancient One said calmly. Heaven's Mirror, Lin Hao, already soaring above the atmosphere, unleashed his newly acquired power, dragging the massive Celestials into a world of ice and snow. Damn, he's trying to steal another life. The fiery Wu Fengji was frustrated. Eternal's invincibility was fine, but now with his new powers and a divine weapon in hand, she was eager to test the waters with this adult Celestial. However, Lin Hao beat her to the punch once again. I've heard people say bad things about me before I even arrived. A dark shadow suddenly appeared outside the Nanshan gate. Behind the shattered space, Lin Hao was floating. Come, let me show you the waters. With a wave of his hand, he led Wu Fengji, holding the divine spear, and the white-bearded Ancient One to the icy space. Chapter 280. Didn't you say you wouldn't take action? With the abilities of Aim no Mikaku and Yomi Hirasaka, Lin Hao's mobility in space was greatly enhanced, and he also gained the ability to control high-speed enemies and oversized creatures. After all, the Marvel Universe is constantly populating with superheroes and villains capable of light-speed travel, as well as species larger than planets. It feels like the editors, when drawing comics, just throw whatever they think is incredible into the mix, completely disregarding rationality. A superhero capable of withstanding the speed of light could be wounded by a mere pistol bullet? It's simply outrageous. It's outrageous. But no matter how outrageous, since it's already been established, Lin Hao has to deal with it. He can't just use his editing privileges to change the settings every time he encounters someone, right? Now, if someone is stared at by the Runnigan, he can teleport the enemy into dedicated space with a single thought, preventing them from leaving unless another Runnigan with the same ability appears. Even enemies with special abilities can only teleport within a single space and cannot escape. Aim no Michu is a supreme control skill. Even Kaguya Otsutsuki, the 1,000-year-old housewife, could have trapped the Savior Squad with it if she hadn't been backstabbed by a filial son. The Great Demon King naturally had no concerns about another pair of Samsara Sharingan appearing in the Marvel Universe to cause trouble. Lin Hao brought Ancient One and Wu Fengji to the icy space. Aerith May, a member of the Celestial God group who had arrived earlier, was attempting to leave the ice-covered planet. However, no matter how he activated his special abilities, he could not return to the familiar deep space. Beyond this icy planet, not a single starlight could be seen. No stars, no satellites, and even further away, no Milky Way. Beyond the planet lay endless darkness, as if it were the only planet in the universe. This isn't scientific, Aerith May roared in frustration. Sorry, science doesn't govern this place. Lin Hao floated above Aerith May, level with his line of sight. This altitude even broke through the icy planet's atmosphere. Fortunately, the space created by the Samsara Sharingan defied science. There was oxygen outside the planet and no cosmic radiation. Alisum was like a giant treading on a small ball, a few steps enough to circle the icy planet. Two Dao-seeking jades transformed into flat steps, lifting Ancient One and Wu Fengji. Gazing at the three ant-like earthlings before him, Alisum felt a surge of offended anger. As a member of the celestial gods who had transformed Earth into the home of his descendants, Alisum held no special affection for the planet. He could no longer sense the descendant's life force. Evidently, the descendant had failed to conceive. "Did you kill Shiamat?" a thunderous voice echoed across the icy planet. "Who?" Lin Hao scratched his ears, turning his head away slightly, feigning surprise. "You mean that red stone? It even has a name." Alisum fell silent, raising his mountainous fist and smashing it down on the three ants. "Go ahead. I won't take action this time." Lin Hao gestured to Wu Fengji beside him. Wu Fengji instantly transforming into a crimson dragon 100 feet long, streaking through the void. Its claws treading on clouds of flames, it charged towards Alisum's fist, bearing its divine spear. As it drew closer, Wu Fengji transformed into a small dragon form, grasping the divine spear and thrusting it at the Celestials. The shimmering golden light of the divine spear terrified Alisum, and he quickly retracted his force, attempting to change his movements. However, while his massive frame gave him planet-destroying power, it also made his movements cumbersome. It wasn't that his speed was slow, but rather that his sheer size made him vulnerable to being exploited by a force of comparable strength. As she launched the charge, Wu Fengji suddenly activated the phoenix power within her, enveloping her in a blanket of red light and accelerating her speed. The divine spear's thrust cut a horrific gash in Alisum's massive fist, sending blood gushing out like molten lava, raining down fire on the icy planet, melting the snow that had remained unchanged for countless years. "Earthlings, you've angered me," Alisum roared in a deafening roar. It must be said that the Celestial's roar was a terrifying blow even to ordinary humans. Souls be damned, the fiery Feng, never one to tolerate his enemies, swung his divine spear, sending it flying, and charged at Alisum again. Poor Alisum, due to his enormous size, had very little room to maneuver on this tiny planet, leaving him completely at a disadvantage against the immense speed and strength of Wu Fengji. In the past, Wu Fengji, relying on her dragon and phoenix power, could have fought the Celestials, but the Celestials were too tough and thick-skinned for her fists to penetrate. With a divine spear, however, it was different. Its power and speed magnified its sharpness. If she caught the opportunity, she would inevitably poke holes in the Celestials' massive bodies. "So the divine spear is truly that powerful," Lin Hao, watching from behind, exclaimed with emotion. "No wonder the old nun retreated when she saw the divine spear." "Which year was that year?" asked the white-bearded ancient one beside him curiously. "Exactly 2 years and 3 months. Time flies, and time is unforgiving." Lin Hao shook his head and sighed. "Back then, I had to rely on my divine spear to scare off the old nun. Now she's gone." "Did she die peacefully?" Whitebeard Ancient One didn't want to talk. After all, the old nun was his alternate incarnation. "You haven't even reached the age of 1 kun, yet you've mastered a power far greater than that of others who possess powers of hundreds, thousands, or even billions of years. Have you considered what others might think?" Tiny Wu Fengji, compared to the massive Alisum, was even smaller than a speck of dust floating before a human's eyes, making it impossible for Alisum to lock onto Wu Fengji. The planet was small, and there was no room for him to maneuver. Seeing the small wounds on his body increasing, Alisum suddenly knelt, stomped hard on the icy planet, and used the recoil to fly into the darkness beyond. With his stomp, the entire icy planet suddenly cracked with countless cracks. The entire rocky planet, like a watermelon struck by a hammer, burst forth with cracks. Magma erupted from the Earth's core, rapidly submerging the surface ice that had held it together for countless years. "Damn! You're tearing down my house," Lin Hao raged, suddenly activating Yomi Hirasaka and shooting a gray bone directly at the soaring Alisum's head. The communist-killing gray bone, so tiny it was no match for a single hair, filled Alisum with immense fear. He quickly turned his head, attempting to dodge. But the next moment, countless black spatial cracks suddenly appeared around the massive body, and one after another, the communist-killing gray bone shot towards Alisum without mercy. This time, the planet-sized body dragged Alisum into the abyss. No matter how hard he tried to dodge, he could not escape the rain of communist-killing gray bones. After absorbing a celestial being nurtured for over 4 billion years, Lin Hao's sacred fruit, in terms of chakra alone, far surpassed anything Kaguya Otsutsuki cultivated in the ninja world. This granted Lin Hao a vastly superior chakra pool, allowing her to lavishly exploit Otsutsuki's killer moves. Finally, Alyssum was struck by the majority of the common killing ash bones. The power of laws emanating from another world rendered a celestial being, who had lived for at least billions of years, helpless. He could only watch as the gray spot spread across his crimson form. If he were still in the Marvel Universe, he might have managed to escape to his base camp in time, severing his slack in escaping, but this dimension was disconnected from the outside world, preventing him from returning. Lin Hao, didn't you say you wouldn't attack? Wu Fengji, floating in the sky, turned and shouted at Lin Hao. I didn't attack, I just threw a few fleshless bones. Lin Hao shook his hands, demonstrating his commitment. If she hadn't been defeated, Wu Fengji would have wanted to stab him with her divine spear. She finally understood what Zheng Xian had meant when he'd specifically mentioned Lin Hao as quite irritating. His heart and head are still there, go cut off his head. Gu Yi, playing the good guy, offered Wu Fengji a friendly reminder. Chapter 281 Send more people to help the islanders rebuild their homes. The sight of the massive, crimson celestials, so vast it resembled the sky, flashing and retreating, was captured by those on Earth, especially the Eternals, their tools. Just now, the loudmouthed beauty Tina muttered, gazing at the sky intently, did Supreme Alyssum arrive? Captain Ajak immediately closed his eyes, attempting to sense their creator, but received no response. He disappeared. Ajak was incredulous. How is this possible? The Celestials, having survived for billions of years, were among the most powerful beings in the universe. How could anyone on Earth possibly pose a threat to them? Was this still the Earth they had been on for over 7,000 years? The sudden appearance and disappearance of Alyssum interrupted the Eternals' plans to defeat the Ten Tails. The Ten Tails suddenly leaped high, its butt opening in the night sky, fusing with it a larger tailed beast ball. Damn it! Get out of the way, Ajak shouted to his team. Several people sitting cross-legged on the ground, sharing energy with Cersei, quickly stood up. Speedster unleashed his full power, moving his team members far away. Little Superman Icarus circled in the air, interfering with the Ten Tails' energy beams from his eyes. The Ten Tails, however, persevered, executing a final, oversized tailed beast ball. The ball plummeted downward, like divine punishment from the sky, striking a volcano below, a world-renowned active volcano, considered sacred by the islanders, Mount Fuji. Shit, Icarus roared from the sky. That monster definitely did it on purpose. Retreat, Ajak shouted. The massive tailed beast ball flattened the hills on the ground before plunging into the magma. A few breaths later, the rock layers exploded, sending magma soaring into the sky and showering the surrounding area like a fiery rain. The first wave of magma was dislodged by the blast wave. Then, like a boiling oil pan being poured into a basin of cold water, the magma ocean beneath the Earth's crust came to life. Columns of lava shot skyward, carrying with them countless plumes of toxic gases and granular ash. Thick, leaden clouds obscured the moonlight. The gushing sea of magma flowed in all directions, instantly engulfing the green forests at the foot of the mountain and surging towards the human towns. Unable to tell which was faster, the lava or the searing ash, the islanders surrounding Mount Fuji, like the inhabitants of Pompeii, were plunged into a vision of doom. Unfortunately, this wasn't a realistic film, it was harsh reality. The culprit in the sky, after unleashing this apocalyptic blow, didn't descend. Instead, a massive cloud of white smoke erupted. Its dissipation was destined to bring the monster, long forgotten by both the United States and Japan, to an end. Inside the World Security Council chamber, the representatives of the 5 nations observed the island nation's plight with a wave of sympathy. The American representative, after watching, felt a sudden sense of peace. While they had lost their military base, the islanders had lost their faith. It seems we should increase our manpower in the island nation. The big-name representative wasn't laughing, he was seriously considering how many people to send to rescue the residents of Tokyo and the suffering islanders. With so many people, they'd have to find accommodation, right? If the space was too small, wouldn't it undermine the reputation of our nation and its greatness? They couldn't be worse off than the Americans of the past, right? It just so happened that so many people had died, leaving a lot of space available. I believe our country should contribute to the post-disaster reconstruction of the island nation. I'm sure everyone can see our infrastructure. With deep compassion, The Asian American man solemnly offered his services. "We are willing to provide 10,000 highly skilled infrastructure workers to help the islanders rebuild their homes. The reconstruction process might take a while, and perhaps single workers would help the widowed islanders regain confidence in life. Our country can also provide professional rescue personnel," the Gallic rooster said eagerly. "The islanders have suffered so much, and international aid is essential. Although Britain is small, we are willing to contribute," the British representative quickly expressed his support. The American representatives had nothing to say. They themselves also had to quickly rebuild the island nation's military base, and they would definitely need to send more people. What excuse could they use to prevent other countries from sending more people? The magma emerging from Mount Fuji was still flowing, and the 5 major countries had already begun to organize rescue and reconstruction personnel. Their efficiency was very high. They looked like they were sharpening their knives and couldn't wait. When the 10 tails disappeared, the 3 SWARD aerospace motherships finally arrived, and the agents of the 5 major countries entered the ruined Tokyo and began to maintain order. They brazenly took over the remaining security system of the island nation, opened the strategic reserve warehouse, took out the supplies, and organized the surviving islanders to work, built shelters away from Mount Fuji, and gathered the surviving islanders. The Shenlong Bureau's ring fortress continued to float over Tokyo, suppressing all monsters. Seeing this situation, America, fearing its own territory would be completely plundered, hurriedly dispatched personnel from military bases in Hokkaido, Kyushu, and the Ryukyu Islands to Tokyo, attempting to challenge the SHIEARD. With the emperor missing and the cabinet in hiding, the island nation was leaderless and at the mercy of the greater powers. Deploying personnel from other bases took time, so by the time they arrived, the 10 Eternals had vanished. SHIERD did not attempt to stop them. The mastermind who had dealt with Alisum had already stolen their home before they could return. "Director, this ship looks quite good," Yu Zhen, Deputy Director of SHIERD's Technical Development Department and Lin Hao's deputy, surveyed the Eternals ship as if you were catching a glimpse of delicious food. The Eternals ship might appear antique, but it was in fact a superior vessel, its technological level among the best in the universe. The Kree, with only 1,000,000 years of civilization, could not match the Eternals' technological prowess. After all, the creators of these tools were the Supreme Celestials, who had existed for billions of years. Even a pig that has lived for billions of years would have accumulated a terrifying depth of knowledge. Therefore, Lin Hao didn't kill Alisum. Before the common killing ashes could spread to his brain, he had Wu Fengji decapitate him, force his soul out, and sign a contract, thereby gaining access to his billions of years of accumulated knowledge. Quickly digest their technology by comparing it with real objects. SHIE's next strategy will focus on the interstellar and the multiverse, Lin Hao instructed. Understood. I've wanted to explore an alien planet for a long time, Yu Zhen was eager to try. The long-distance navigation technology and star maps that once plagued SHIE are no longer a problem. With Whitebeard's advance into the interstellar space, he has already obtained detailed intelligence on several habitable planets. Awaiting SHIE's future strategy focuses on the vast universe and the multiverse, but information regarding the multiverse will be kept private, limited to members of the Huaxia Alliance team and selected special operations teams. Because some things can't be touched upon, otherwise the first generation will see their descendants failing to live up to expectations. Therefore, they can only use the superficial excuse of heading towards the stars and the sea to deal with Zheng Xian's superiors, thereby mobilizing the power of the entire country, adjusting the development model to the interstellar development model, and then using a small group of elite forces to enter the multiverse. Fortunately, the base universe alone is large enough to fully mobilize the enthusiasm of compatriots. Fearing that there would be problems with the last few paragraphs, I revised and revised them again, feeling uneasy. Chapter 282, The Newly Emerged Nine-Tails Jinchuariki. Mount Fuji's lava continued to erupt, and an area hundreds of kilometers around it became a restricted zone. While massive lava flowed southward into the sea, a vast ocean of lava formed to the northwest and west, blocking land travel between Tokyo and western Honshu. The Five Nations Joint Rescue Team was forced to establish a refuge camp far from this area to accommodate the few islanders who had managed to survive. Meanwhile, Chi Aragaki was assisting in Saitama Prefecture, northwest of Tokyo. As Director Lin's fellow townsman from 700 years ago and a chosen tool, demons and the Ten Tails avoided her. Furthermore, Her chakra-enhanced strength allowed her to remain unscathed even during the sacred tree's rampage. Perhaps out of compassion, or perhaps because she had lived in Tokyo for over a decade, Chi Aragaki could not ignore the suffering of these Tokyoites. She presented her ID, disguised herself as a visiting police inspector from out of town, and joined the rescue operation. The 100 demons raiding Tokyo, the rampage of the sacred tree, and the subsequent Ten Tails battle against the Eternal seemed like a lot, but in reality, it lasted less than 3 hours. From 8 or 9 o'clock until now, the day hadn't even ended yet. Many Tokyo residents who had managed to survive felt that the whole night was just a nightmare, that they could just close their eyes and sleep and everything would be fine tomorrow. The Imperial Palace was still there, Ginza was still there, the central 6 districts were intact, and they could continue to be office workers, with no hope but at least safety. Unfortunately, life has no ifs. All Tokyo residents must open their eyes and face this harsh reality. You still have the heart to rescue them here. Chi Aragaki was once again pulled into the illusion by the nine-tailed fox. Upon meeting, she heard its almost mocking voice. I have to admit, there was a slight problem with my plan. The monster imprisoned in the sacred tree is still as powerful as ever. It took me some time to recover its strength and subdue it. Her silky jade feet dangled playfully over the edge of the embroidered couch, and her casual voice made Chi Aragaki feel the nine-tailed fox's disregard for human life. What did you mean? Chi Aragaki no longer felt much gratitude for the nine-tailed fox, now she was filled with a fear of courting disaster. Sumitomo, Mitsui, and Mitsubishi, these 3 families haven't given up their intention to continue offering sacrifices to me in Ryukyu. Instead, after witnessing the devastation in Tokyo, their thirst for supernatural power has intensified, and so they've accelerated their search for offerings, impersonating the nine-tailed fox. Nyon spoke casually. Under current circumstances, even a loss of 1 million, let alone 100,000, could be attributed to the disaster. Coupled with the Ryukyu Mold's massive northward advance, this presents a golden opportunity for them to perform their sacrifices. Asshole, you lied to me, Chi Aragaki boldly shouted, completely disregarding the disparity in power between the 2 sides. You said I could stop their sacrifices by placing those damn branches near the Imperial Palace. Nyon waved her hand, and Chi Aragaki was pinned to the ground by a tremendous force, unable to move. Even if I lied to you, what can you do? Nguyen sneered. This world is cruel, and strength is the guarantee to settle disputes. If I didn't have the strength, I would have been killed thousands of years ago. If I didn't get my strength back, how could I take revenge on the islanders tonight? Give up your ridiculous delusions. You and I are both from the ancient country next door. Haven't you heard the saying there is peace only through struggle for peace? Bastard, if I had the strength, I would kill you first. Aragaki Chi was furious and helpless. Nice momentum. Nguyen followed the script, summoning a smaller, yellow-haired nine-tailed fox with a wave of her hand. A smile played on her lips. You want power? I can give it to you. If you sign a contract, I can seal this useless offspring within you, granting you true supernatural power. Instead of simply increasing your strength, you'll gain a more comprehensive array of supernatural magic, the power to protect your compatriots from harm. Aragaki Chi hesitated for a moment before gritting her teeth and agreeing. Okay, I'll sign. As an adult, she understood that every gift from fate came with a price. She had no choice, even if it meant selling her soul to a monster. Smart choice. After Aragaki Chi placed her bloody handprint on a piece of parchment that appeared out of thin air, Nguyen waved her over and slapped the miniature yellow-haired nine-tailed fox into her stomach. As a circle of black runes vanished, a vast energy surged within Aragaki Chi's body, and a variety of magical information filled her mind. Lin Hao cancelled his hand seals, clapped his hands, and his command came true. After sending the first tool away, Nguyen, as her boss had instructed, continued searching for a new one. She had to complete the formation of the new ninja clan as quickly as possible. After all, the Japanese's bravery was limited, and accustomed to admiring the strong, they could easily choose to forget their hatred with the help of the 5-nation joint rescue team. This wouldn't work. They had to turn their hatred into action. The purposeful retention of a group of Eternals, a mix of yellow, white, and black, speaking American English, was precisely to keep the Japanese on target. Leaving Nguyen alone, who continued her search for a tool, Chi Aragaki, the nine-tails Jinchuriki, immediately left her sanctuary in Saitama and bolted toward the eastern sea. Tokyo was devastated, and the southern skies were blanketed in thick volcanic ash. All flights to Tokyo were grounded, and even those scheduled to land at Tokyo Airport that night were forced to make emergency landings elsewhere. Chieragaki could only rely on her own 2 feet to return to the Ryukyu Islands. Fortunately, Lin Hao treated this 700-year-old ancestor with considerable kindness, granting her the power of a full 9 tails and instilling 7 types of ninjutsu. As a fellow contracted partner, the 9 tails naturally obeyed his orders, cooperating with the Jinchuriki, transforming Chieragaki into perfect Jinchuriki. Now truly possessing speeds exceeding the speed of sound, she sprinted across the sea, ignoring the waves. Along the way, she encountered numerous northbound fungus fleets, all members of the Pacific Fleet once stationed in Kyushu and Okinawa. With a sudden thought, Chieragaki clapped her hands. Water style, great explosion water wave. A surge of water suddenly appeared, a massive wave hundreds of meters high, barreling towards the fungus fleet at breakneck speed. This was a test of her newfound power. Furthermore, Nion's words reminded Chieragaki that since she had sold her soul to Yaokei and finally gained extraordinary powers, why not do more? Hadn't the Ryukyu Independence Organization she joined been pursuing independence for decades? Before, when the fungus soldiers were stationed in the Ryukyu Islands, all her efforts had been a self-defeating joke. Now that she possessed extraordinary power, was she going to let the younger girls of the village continue to be bullied by the fungus soldiers? Huge waves crashed against the fungus fleet, instantly destroying this human army that had cost so much money. Seeing that her casual attack could have such an effect, Chieragaki's confidence soared. It turned out that the once untouchable fungus fleet was so fragile. To be honest, water-based ninjutsu is indeed a natural enemy of modern navies, and on the sea, it can also draw on the power of nature. The powerful aircraft carrier fleet was ultimately no match for the 100-meter high waves. I can do it. With the confidence brought by her power, Chieragaki headed south, eliminating the fungus fleet she encountered at sea, and heading towards the Ryukyu Islands. How was it? After finishing the job, Lin Hao, who had already returned to the Shunmiao Bureau's Ring Fortress, boasted to Zheng Xian with a smile, "Is my fellow countryman from 700 years ago okay?" Zheng Xian shook his head expressionlessly and sighed softly. "The Americans are so unlucky to have met you. Don't just talk jokes. When the Americans can't hold on anymore, remember to ask them if they need military assistance," Lin Hao said with a smile. "We must make them fulfill the promise they made 60 years ago. We can do what the bald transport captain dared not do." Chapter 283, America can't escape from emotions, right? America, New York. Ever since Washington was attacked by its own people, New York has become the political center of the United States, not just its economic center. The conglomerates behind the scenes have transformed a large suburban estate into a new congressional and government complex, transferring all responsibilities previously held by the White House and the Pentagon. It's fair to say that this centralized staff has dramatically improved administrative efficiency. The bickering between Congress and the White House has completely disappeared, likely due to the fact that the bosses behind the scenes have simply sacrificed their dignity and taken charge. In short, the provisional federal government of the United States has demonstrated a rare strength and efficiency in this critical moment. Congressmen are naturally plentiful in America. They are simply the lackeys of the conglomerates, available as many as they need. Bureaucrats and military officers with governing experience are, on the other hand, more difficult to find, forcing a relaxation of restrictions on military and political families. Compared to other countries, America possesses a very interesting characteristic: the distinct divisions between financial, political, and military families. Take the Rockefellers, Kennedys, and Pattons, for example. Each family has its own distinct characteristics, almost like a character card, each specialized in one area. In reality, these divisions aren't entirely separate. There's no such thing as politicians can't engage in business. Once a family acquires wealth, it seeks political protection. Then, as its power grows, it ventures into the military, even controlling its own armed forces. However, other countries have long histories, and after years of elimination, the remaining great families have generally expanded their reach into various industries. They possess vast industries and have produced notable politicians and military figures throughout their history, making them indistinguishable from one another. However, America's brief history, with its true rise spanning less than 70 years, has meant that its families haven't experienced centuries of accumulation, forcing them to focus their efforts on a single field. After all, even starting from the mid-19th century, When the major American conglomerates began to emerge, the history of the great American families stretches back only a mere 150 to 160 years, spanning only 4 or 5 generations. Cultivating outstanding politicians or military personnel requires not only investment but also talent. Without it, there simply isn't. Outsiders, married into family, are ultimately no match for the bloodline of the family. Of course, the wealthy conglomerates have for centuries perpetually infiltrated the political and military spheres, and even those politicians and military personnel who once held high positions of power have not forgotten to enrich themselves. Nothing is new under the sun, and the operations of these American families are no different from those of their counterparts in ancient nations, nor are they particularly sophisticated. Our ancestors were practicing these practices 2,000 or 3,000 years ago. This national context has created a unique family ecology in America, where conglomerate families, along with political and military families, both cooperate and remain wary of each other, each striving to exploit their own weaknesses and escape the other's control. This, coupled with the conflict between Anglo-Savage pirates and Jewish conglomerates, has shaped America's unique political landscape. If we make a crude distinction, the Anglo-Saxon pirates who arrived first in North America controlled American politics and military affairs, while the Jewish financial groups who immigrated later, leveraging their financial power, controlled the American economy. In reality, this interdependence is inherently intertwined. Now that Washington has been destroyed, with Congress, the White House, and the Pentagon all destroyed, the Anglo-Saxon pirates appear to have suffered heavy losses. After all, their victims were all talented professionals. But the congressmen, knowing all, are just a bunch of trolls. Seizing this opportunity, the financial groups have aggressively infiltrated American politics and military affairs. However, running such a vast state apparatus requires specialized expertise, and restrictions on the Anglo-Saxon pirates have been relaxed. After all, a sinking ship benefits no one. With the Pentagon gone, the newly reorganized Joint Chiefs of Staff directly oversees the vast American military apparatus. While Gaohua was destroying the fungus fleet, she noticed that one squadron after another had suddenly lost contact. What the hell is going on with the Pacific Fleet? While Tokyo, in the East 9th District, was approaching midnight, New York, in the West 5th District, was still just after 10 in the morning. Ever since the 100 Demons raiding Tokyo incident broke out, the provisional federal government outside New York City has been closely monitoring developments. They witnessed the chaos in Tokyo, the overwhelming arrival of the SHIE Bureau, and the scenes of monsters destroying the fungus base. The newly formed Joint Chiefs of Staff urgently dispatched troops from Kyushu and Ryukyu to the north, a decision passed by the newly formed Joint Chiefs of Staff. This move is a matter of American hegemony. They must continue to flex their muscles for the islanders and the world, and not let the world doubt their position as world hegemon because of the SHIE Bureau's impressive performance. Confidence is gold in America is not just a proverb, it's a practical reality. America must continue to project a strong image to the world. But just when they were about to flex their muscles, they turned around and found that their muscles were gone. Where's the response from the naval base? Where is the fleet? Why has it lost contact? The generals of the Joint Chiefs of Staff roared. In this information age, every fleet must maintain contact with both its base and the highest military authorities after sailing. Lost contact can only mean two things, destroyed or treason. The communications officer quickly verified the situation and reported, both the Kyushu and Ryukyu naval bases have reported that the fleet has sailed. Where could they go? The generals had a foreboding feeling. Soon, this ominous premonition was realized. Reporting, monitoring satellites have detected multiple large waves in the waters south of Honshu Island. The marked fleet has been struck by these waves. The communications officer responsible for sending and receiving military satellite information arrived to report the anomaly. Turn to the big screen, with the general's command. The screen began to broadcast the military satellite footage. Modern technology is now clear enough to capture any movement on land or at sea. Suddenly, the ocean surged with a 100-meter-high wave, less than 2 kilometers from the fungus fleet. It was outrageous. If it had only happened once, one might have hesitated, but with so many similar incidents occurring southward, even the most naive would have turned their suspicions on the endless stream of transcendence. It's over. The Pacific Fleet must have encountered an unknown supernatural being. Shit. Monsters are against us, but why are supernatural beings specifically targeting America? That's unscientific, Yes, even from a probabilistic perspective, it's unscientific. For the past 2 years, America has been plagued by a series of incidents. Just when they were beginning to suspect the continent's feng shui was bad, the subsequent supernatural events in Osaka and Tokyo brought a sigh of relief. It seemed America wasn't the only country at risk. But their joy was barely a few hours old when they discovered that the supernatural events in the island nation ultimately brought disaster upon America. What's the logic? It seems America can't escape this, right? Gentlemen, forget about science, let's look at this line. A quick-witted staff officer immediately marked the location of the huge wave on a map, then connected it into a single line. The generals on the Joint Chiefs of Staff could clearly see the line running south, skirting Kyushu Island and faintly pointing towards the Ryukyu Islands. Something's going to happen to the Ryukyu Islands. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 284 Ryukyu Before Dawn. Late in the morning, the clamor of Naha Harbor faded beneath the night sky. A gentle sea breeze caressed the waves, creating a remarkable tranquility. From the harbor's night market, the aroma of fireworks mingled with the aroma of various foods, mingling with the occasional cheers of joy from the patrons. The events in Tokyo had plunged the entire island nation into grief, but Ryukyu was an exception. With the departure of the moldy fleet, Ryukyu seemed to shed some of its constraints, and the air felt lighter. Seeing this, Chieragaki, racing south, breathed a sigh of relief. Fortunately, she was fast enough to outpace the Japanese Zaibatsu. Chieragaki glanced at the peaceful Naha Harbor, then turned and headed for the floating island opposite the harbor, returning to her hometown of Kyun Village. She didn't wake her fellow villagers, but instead toiled on the small island, single-handedly carving a barrier. In the ninja world, such barriers were reserved for the largest ninja villages. Smaller villages were not only unable to maintain them, but also lacked the skills to create them. As the perfect Jinchuriki, Chieragaki has no shortage of chakra, and she has a complete set of supporting technologies in her memory, so carving a barrier covering Kyun Village is no problem. No matter how the situation develops next, Chieragaki must first ensure the safety of her fellow villagers. This is probably the local sentiment in the Chinese genes that has always influenced her. By the time she finished carving the barrier, it was past 3 in the morning, the darkest time of the night. The night market in Naha Port was coming to an end, and the drunkards were returning home or going to entertainment venues where they could stay overnight to continue the next activity. Suddenly, more than 10 passenger ships appeared on the sea, belonging to the Sumitomo, Mitsui, and Mitsubishi consortiums, and the passenger ships were filled with homeless people they had deceived and kidnapped from all over the island country in the past few days. It seems the rumors about the factory being built in Ryukyu are true. I saw passenger ships from the Mitsui and Mitsubishi conglomerates. With so many ships, they must be carrying a lot of workers and supplies. Aboard a Sumitomo ferry, a homeless man took advantage of a break from using the restroom to run to the side of the ship and peer around. Spotting the ships from the other two conglomerates, he ran back to his cabin to show off to his fellow homeless people. Are the 3 major conglomerates joining forces? How big a factory are they going to build? Why haven't I heard about this in the news before? Bang! This must be a special plot by the conglomerate bosses. They have to keep it secret. Who cares? As long as I have a job and get paid on time, I can go home in a year or 2. When talking about home, hope shone in all the homeless people's eyes. The homeless in the island nation are similar to those in the United States, forced into homelessness by financial ruin. However, American society lacks the family ties found in Eastern culture. Children generally separate from their parents upon adulthood, and parents have no obligations to their children. As a result, the American homeless lack the same obsession with family that the island nation's homeless do. Who would want to drift around as a homeless person if they could feel proud to go home and have a place to call home? It's simply because the island nation's economy has been in a state of decline for years, making it difficult for low-skilled workers to find jobs and a stable income. Besides begging and scavenging, homeless people can only find odd jobs. When they earn money, they play pachinko. If they lose, they retreat to the bridge and continue to hide. If they win, they indulge in a few days of feasting and drinking, living a carefree life. Now that the three major conglomerates have joined forces to build a factory, it's likely quite large, and the construction will take at least several years. This will provide them with a stable income for several years. Suddenly, life has given them hope again. Unfortunately, these homeless people can't find other passenger ships, otherwise they would be able to find out why the homeless people on other ships were lured there. Indeed, the homeless people on these various passenger ships all came for the same purpose. Some were deceived into working, others into volunteering, and the reasons are varied. The three major conglomerates simply want these people to board their ships and voluntarily land in the Ryukyu Islands. After all, what's more convenient than loading and unloading cargo without the cargo voluntarily embarking and disembarking? The heads of local Ryukyu companies, contacted in advance, were waiting at the port. As soon as the ferry arrived, they quickly notified the port staff on duty to arrange dispatch. Naha Port consists of three parts: Naha Naval Port, Tomari Port, and Naha New Port. The Sumiosi and Kakakahana areas on the south bank of the Kunaba River are military ports exclusively used by the Japanese. The three major consortiums docked at Ansha Port, also known as Naha New Port, which was renovated after the island nation reacquired Ryukyu. Master, I can clearly see that all of the Japanese fleets have departed. The head of the Iwasaki family's shipping company in Ryukyu is a close confidant of Iwasaki Nagashi. Although their family initially established a trading company in Osaka, their true rise was marked by their shipping industry. Naha Port has historically been a vital trading port in the Western Pacific, particularly a crucial transit point for ancient Sino-Japanese trade. The Iwasaki family's shipping company has been operating in Naha for over a century. After World War II, the Japanese arrived. Although the Japanese had to cater to their father's wishes, how could an island nation survive and develop without engaging in ocean trade? Therefore, the Iwasaki family's shipping company still holds considerable power. After receiving a satellite call from Iwasaki Nagashi, the branch manager personally headed to high-rise building in the port area to observe the fungus fleet's movements. Thanks to Naha's small size, with a land area of only 38 square kilometers, he was able to obtain the intelligence he sought from the top of his own shipping company building, armed with a telescope. The fungus fleet's hasty northward advance tonight left them with no time to conceal their presence, making them easily observed. Excellent. Without them, we can be more confident in our actions. Iwasaki Nagashi's eyes blazed. Nearby, Sumitomo Masake and Mitsui Hisaichi shared a glimmer of joy. The events of tonight in Tokyo undoubtedly infuriated these three veterans. If they hadn't been busy preparing for the festival in recent days, they might have traveled to Tokyo on business. That would have been a real disaster. Even the emperor and the cabinet ministers were completely out of contact, and Tokyo's wealthy areas were particularly hard hit. Had they been in Tokyo, they would have been doomed. Where would they even stand a chance of pursuing extraordinary power? The three poor old men had no idea the nine-tailed fox they were waiting for had no intention of responding. It was currently searching the island for courageous tools, with no intention of returning to visit them. Like ordinary old men deceived by health supplement salesmen, the three old men, with the extravagant hope of immortality, followed Shidaka Iyomi's casual retelling of the story, and prepared everything, hoping only for the mighty nine-tailed fox to grant them power. Although the nine-tailed fox only appeared once during the Tokyo incident, the world was convinced that the mastermind behind the incident was none other than Tamamonami, a figure believed in the legend of the emperor. Otherwise, why would demons and monsters attack Tokyo for no apparent reason? Why would a strange giant tree destroy the imperial palace? Why would the nine-tailed fox occupy its summit, ultimately taking away the distinctive fruit? Every detail was clearly orchestrated by the nine-tailed fox. The logic was coherent and convincing. Regardless, the five great nations observing the entire incident believed this theory. Chieragaki, empowered by the nine-tailed fox, was also convinced, as were the three well-informed Jebel elders. From a certain perspective, their conclusions were flawless. The great devil declared, yes, the infamous nine-tailed fox is the mastermind behind the Tokyo incident. While the nine-tailed fox was the mastermind behind the Tokyo incident, it had revealed her immense supernatural power to the three elders. What business is it that they have if people die in Tokyo? All they want is the supernatural power of immortality. Chapter 285, The Tailed Beast Ball Blasts at the Ryukyu Fungus Base. Passenger ships docked at the port, and homeless people, swindled and kidnapped from across the island nation, disembarked one after another and were transported by trucks to an empty field outside Naha. This was the site chosen by the three major chaebols for the ritual. Chieragaki, who had carved a barrier for Kume village, stood atop a high-rise building in downtown Naha, surveying the port's activity. How pathetic and despicable, having personally signed a contract with a nine-tailed fox and gained extraordinary powers, Chieragaki understood that the fox's chosen targets were completely arbitrary, and there was no need to slaughter humans for the ritual. The three Jebel bosses were clearly wishful thinking. Even if they slaughtered over 100,000 homeless people, the nine-tailed fox wouldn't even glance. Though she felt reluctant, Chieragaki, now empowered and determined to act, had a different mindset. She had learned not to let a momentary hesitation interfere with her larger mission. Besides, even if she went to tell the homeless the truth now, who would believe her before the slaughter began? After all, no sane person would believe such a madness. It would be better to wait until the massacre begins and then eliminate the elders of the three chaebols directly. Then, facts will speak louder than words. It took the three chaebols 2 or 3 hours to unload the passenger ship. Fortunately, the expansion in the 1970s increased the handling capacity of Naha's new port, otherwise it would have been late in the morning by the time they finished unloading. Over 100,000 homeless people landed in Naha and were transported directly to the fields outside. Foreign mercenaries, secretly controlled by the three chaebols, had already arrived there with armored vehicles equipped with machine guns. If it weren't for the sudden changes in Tokyo tonight that distracted the mold, transporting these mercenaries and their equipment to the Ryukyu Islands would have been a huge undertaking for the three chaebols, even though they controlled the shipping companies. This divine opportunity bolstered the three elders' confidence, making them believe it was a divine intervention. Not only did it safely avoid the Tokyo incident, but it also gave them a boost in their pursuit of transcendence. Even the heavens were helping us. As dawn approached, the homeless gathered in the fields outside Naha gradually noticed something was amiss. Something's wrong. I just asked the people on another boat, and they said they weren't here to work, but to volunteer for a pharmaceutical company. They said the Mitsui Group paid them to come and attend an opening ceremony to liven up the atmosphere. As the homeless people from different boats exchanged ideas, they were shocked to discover that their reasons for coming to the Ryukyu Islands were different. Something's wrong. Let's run. Having survived years of wandering, avoiding the police and gangs, most homeless people had developed quick reflexes like rabbits. The moment they noticed something was amiss, they took flight. However, before those who had noticed anything amiss could flee, hundreds of trucks carrying the final batch of offerings formed a massive circle in the fields. The drivers suddenly opened the doors, jumped out, and took off. Moments later, the trucks exploded, tearing the homeless people who hadn't yet gotten out of the trucks to pieces and engulfing them in flames. The massive explosions unleashed a bloody massacre. Foreign mercenaries set up machine guns on the perimeter, bloodthirsty grins on their faces, and pulled the trigger at the homeless people, like frightened rabbits. Haha, interesting. Someone actually paid us a fortune to slaughter our own countrymen. This crazy world is truly fascinating, compatriots. In the eyes of the wealthy bosses, these homeless people are not worthy of being their compatriots. Kill them, kill them. This damned world isn't worth lingering in. Mercenaries, constantly on the brink of death, often suffer from psychological problems, relying on lust, sex, and wealth to numb their nerves. They are not a strictly disciplined military, and they have no qualms about raising their knives against the weak. This is why the three major chaebols sent these men here. Otherwise, their own house-bred sons might not have the courage to pull the trigger on their own people. Furthermore, using these secretly controlled mercenaries has another advantage. If word gets out, they can blame these scumbags. After the ritual is completed, they will gain extraordinary powers, and they can simply kill them on the spot. Because time was of the essence, the three veterans' plan, though crude, included a retreat. The explosions and intense gunfire alarmed the residents of Naha Castle and the soldiers stationed at the fungus base. Where's the shooting? Damn it, is it starting? Didn't the higher-ups say it was superhumans coming? Do superhumans use guns? The soldiers remaining at the fungus base had been alerted hours earlier by the new Joint Chiefs of Staff. Under the leadership of their officers, they had already prepared for the enemy and reinforced their defenses. While victory against the mysterious superhumans wasn't certain, they couldn't just sit there and wait for death. Send out the drones and follow the source of the gunfire. The officers at the base made an immediate decision. With the situation still uncertain, it was crucial not to disperse troops outside the base. Under normal circumstances, upon hearing large-scale explosions and gunfire, the soldiers would have immediately set out for the source. Chieragaki's actions in eliminating the fungus fleet along the way had actually helped the three major chaebols. Seeing the mold base's cautiousness, Chieragaki couldn't help but frown. Why aren't you moving? After all, she was only a police officer, not a veteran of the battlefield, so she still held on to her preconceived notions. Seeing the mold base refusing to retreat, Chieragaki had no choice but to storm the base. Xiaojiu, help me. The nine tails sealed within her body wore the helpless expression of a toiler, responding perfunctorily. Oh, freshly separated from the 10 tails, the 9 tails barely enjoyed a few minutes of freedom before its unscrupulous master consigned it to work. His fellow ninja who had been choked by a slap from Hashirama Senju wasn't nearly as miserable. After all, that 9 tails had enjoyed 1,000 years of freedom, hadn't he? However, the masters of this world were even more powerful and sinister than the Six Paths Sage. The 9 tails had no choice but to accept its fate as a laborer, hoping to complete its work soon and achieve freedom. The 9 tails chakra emanated, enveloping Chieragaki in a golden chakra coat, adorned with black Magadama patterns on the front and back. In the darkness before dawn, a sudden burst of golden light, like the sun, erupted. Chieragaki manipulated her chakra cloak, raising 9 golden tails high behind her. The tails converged at the tips, forming a tailed beast ball, black with a hint of purple. The ball quickly took shape and hurtled towards the fungal Ryukyu base. Enemy attack. The fungal base's radar registered no response, but the soldiers in the observation tower saw the tailed beast ball hurtling towards them. Unfortunately, without the fastest man in all the ninja world to help, fungal base could only watch helplessly as the tailed beast ball struck the base, so fast that even the automatic cannons high up on the walls couldn't lock onto it. The tailed beast ball struck fungal base, sending a fireball soaring into the sky. The massive explosion shook downtown Naha, and even the main island of Ryukyu was felt. Chieragaki, a descendant of the Chinese people, finally launched a counterattack on behalf of her fellow Kyum village people and the independence-minded Ryukyu people against the Americans who had colonized the island for decades. This devastating explosion was only the beginning. Chapter 286, Ryukyu mold is completely destroyed. What's going on? Where did the explosion come from? The heads of the 3 Jebel families, who had already moved to the outskirts of Naha, awaiting the completion of the massacre before immediately conducting a sacrificial ceremony, suddenly heard a massive explosion, startled and apprehensive. Have the fungus fleet been dispatched, Master? This is bad. A trusted aide of the Iwasaki family rushed in to report. Is it the fungus base? Iwasaki Nagashi asked impatiently. Yes, the trusted subordinate nodded quickly. Damn it, they're here after all. Iwasaki Nagashi frowned, preparing to activate his backup plan. Huh? The trusted aide was stunned, then quickly explained, No, the explosion was at the fungus base. I know, it was the fungus base. A distraught Iwasaki Nagashi paused for a moment before reacting. What did you say? The fungus base was blown up. Yes, a massive explosion. The flames shot up at least 200 meters high, the trusted aide replied. The heads of the 3 Jebel families exchanged a look of disbelief. Although they had received some intelligence about the Tokyo incident, it was obvious they had no idea the fungus fleet had been destroyed by a mysterious giant wave. Until now, they hadn't realized that the Transcendents were targeting America. After all, it was Tokyo that suffered the most tonight, and it was their own people who were suffering. So, the 3 old men hurried out and looked in the direction of the fungus base. Sure enough, they saw flames rising into the sky and a golden light rapidly rushing toward the explosion. That, Sumitomo Masake gazed at the golden light in the night sky, his face filled with blazing desire and obsession. That's the Transcendent, right? This old man was the oldest, and naturally, his desire for the Transcendent was the strongest. Whether he could overthrow armies and nations wasn't a question for now, but he truly wanted immortality. Witnessing the actual Transcendents attacking the fungus base with their own eyes, the 3 old men's desire intensified. In one word, want. Hurry, have them deal with the sacrifices. We're about to begin the ritual, Sumitomo Masake roared. In the distance, Aragakichi, maintaining her 9 tails chakra mode, rushed to the fungus base and discovered that despite the tailed beast ball's immense power, it hadn't completely destroyed the Ryukyu fungus base. After all, the Ryukyu base is the most important military base of the fungal clan in the Western Pacific, a crucial link in the island arc chain that blocks the Eastern powers. Not only does it cover a vast area, but it also houses various military facilities across the Ryukyu Islands. Even the floating island where Kyum village sits houses 2 shooting and bomb practice ranges. This clearly demonstrates their sinister intentions against the descendants of the Chinese people. Chieragaki's southward campaign to eliminate the Fungal Clan fleet prompted the Fungal Clan to withdraw its forces, concentrating them at the main base. However, this main base is quite large, housing not only a naval base but also a Marine Corps barracks and an Air Force airfield. Given its size, 1 bomb wasn't enough. So Chieragaki deployed several more. Seeing the dazzling golden light, the Fungal Clan members who survived the explosion were no fools and immediately recognized it as the enemy. The remaining defenses began to counterattack the golden light, unleashing a barrage of machine guns and rockets. However, unlike previous targets, this enemy was smaller, faster, and more powerful. The overwhelming barrage of shells was swatted away by its 9 shimmering golden tails. Though the continuous explosions had sapped the tail's power, the 9 tails chakra was renowned for its immense quantity, so immense that it made the 1 tails mad with jealousy, constantly reiterating that the number of tails doesn't represent the strength of a tailed beast. This was truly sour grapes. The shattered tails were replenished almost instantly, continuing to provide protection for Chieragaki. She simply unleashed powerful ninjutsu, bombarding the fungus base. Fire style, great fire extinguishing. Earth style, earthquake core. Lightning style, Kirin. The fungus army air forces hastily launched attack helicopters and fighter jets, hoping to exploit their air superiority to strike the enemy shrouded in golden light. Instead, wind style, wind cutting technique. Chieragaki clapped her hands and puffed her mouth, unleashing a gust of wind into the sky. The wind transformed into countless sharp blades, easily shredding the fungus aircraft armor and setting off a shower of expensive fireworks. The powerful ninjutsu he skillfully unleashed easily destroyed the fortified defenses and advanced weaponry of the fungus base, slaughtering the soldiers concentrated within. Chieragaki was unstoppable, a deity descended from the earth. Damn it, she's not human, we can't win, there's no way we can win, asshole, we've fulfilled our duty as soldiers. This is no ordinary army can defeat this enemy, run, run, the fungus soldiers began to flee. Western armies have long had this tradition. Soldiers view military service as a mere job. As long as they fulfill their combat obligations, even surrendering voluntarily can be recognized by a military tribunal, not treated as deserters or traitors. Upon returning home, they will not even face persecution but rather be hailed as heroes for their active service. This tradition likely stems from the mercenary tradition of medieval Europe. After the collapse of the Roman Empire, Europe lost its chance for unification and embarked on a millennium of multinational warfare, with feudal lords constantly waging war over resources and wealth. However, many small states simply couldn't afford large-scale professional armies, so a curious profession emerged across Europe: mercenaries. These mercenaries would fight for anyone the nobles or kings needed them, even forming a set of customary military contracts. For example, while mercenaries were primarily contracted to one side, if the other side offered a higher price, during the truce after a battle, mercenaries had the right to change their contract and join the opposing side, without the other side worrying about their position. Mercenary armies formed in different regions even had their own distinct characteristics, such as the Polish lancers and the Spanish troopers. This bizarre practice would have shocked all nations in the meat grinder of East Asia. Is there any national identity? Is there any morality? But before the age of exploration, European states were truly so impoverished that they could only resort to temporary mercenary armies when needed. This spirit of military contract has persisted in the modern armies of Western nations. Even as countries continue to strengthen military education and loyalty to the emperor and patriotism, the legacy of this historical stubbornness remains. After all, the nobility enjoyed greater wartime privileges. Not only could they maintain their dignity upon surrender, they could also demand fine food, drink, and even the services of beautiful women. All these expenses ultimately counted towards war reparations. The most profound change to this stubborn problem was, in fact, the Three Germans army, which nearly unified Europe. As for the Mole army, from its inception, it had a strong mercenary character. Why? Because since the American Revolutionary War, this army had been funded by capitalists and farmers, solely responsible for fighting and disbanding immediately after the battle. At the time of North American independence, the major farmers and capitalists of the 13 founding states simply did not want to spend the annual cost of maintaining a large army, so they immediately disbanded the troops upon independence, which later led to the burning of the White House by Canadian militia. George Washington, commander-in-chief of the Union Army, turned around to find that his only remaining troops were the guards of his own farms. He went from commander of the Union Army to captain of security. From the Civil War to World War I, the United States maintained this practice of improvising armies when needed and disbanding them when not. This resulted in the U.S. having a standing army of only 100,000 men before the start of World War II. Can you believe that a land area of nearly 10 million square kilometers only had 100,000 standing troops? Just 20 years earlier, Wu Peifu's army had double the size of the U.S.'s. This demonstrates the pragmatic approach of American capitalists, who avoid spending money they shouldn't. It's easy to understand why they deployed tanks to repel World War I veterans demanding their wages. Wanting more money from the bosses is like asking for their lives. It wasn't until they reaped huge profits from World War II and needed to maintain their petrodollar hegemony that American capitalists were willing to maintain an army of over 10 million men, as they used it as a tool to plunder global wealth. With such an army, how could they expect the soldiers to have the will to fight to the end? Forget it. Even a posthumous pension wouldn't be enough. This was originally an army that relied on its weapons and logistical advantages and could only fight favorable battles. So after seeing that Chieragaki was invincible, it was no surprise that the mold began to flee on a large scale. Panic is contagious. Once someone takes the lead in fleeing, it will quickly spread throughout the army unless the supervision team uses iron-blooded means to stop it. The Joint Chiefs of Staff on the other side of the ocean saw the tragic situation of the Ryukyu base and the soldiers fly through satellites. All the generals had very ugly faces and were speechless. Report: the Spear Bureau sent a clear notice that they will arrive in Ryukyu to protect the local Chinese from the war and asked if we need military assistance. The soldier in charge of communications loudly broke the silence in the command room. Shit, a general said angrily. Who gave them the power? They are invading Ryukyu, obviously. It was force that gave them the power, another general said with a wry smile. Koreans. A general suddenly realized and loudly suggested, we can continue to deploy troops from Korean bases, and then what? Restart the war from 60 years ago? The other generals clearly disagreed with a military conflict with the SHIE. Such a major matter was not for the military to decide, nor were they foolish enough to shoulder such a historical responsibility. To deal with transcendence, we should still use our own transcendence, a general sighed. However, considering all the transcendence currently controlled by the United States, none could match this woman. Even combined, they might not be able to hold out for more than a few minutes. America's transcendents are too weak. Tony Stark, at his West Coast villa, used Jarvis to hack into a military satellite and observed everything happening in Tokyo on the Ryukyu Islands. The once proud genius, after witnessing the endless stream of transcendence that night, felt a wave of despair for the first time. Fuck you, I'm just a clown. The Earth was so complex, and 2 years ago, he boasted that he could maintain world peace single-handedly. It was simply ridiculous. He'd been working tirelessly for 2 years, but the gap hadn't narrowed, it had widened. Against all the extraordinary beings that appeared tonight, his Iron Man armor would likely be nothing more than a minion, completely useless. Who could he defeat? Even if he never slept a minute from now on, dedicating all his time to upgrading his armor, risking his life, could he create a suit capable of defeating a 10-tailed monster? Could he stand up to this woman radiating golden light? No, absolutely not. Without access to the Infinity Stones, he couldn't create an infinity armor, meaning his technological achievements would always remain within the realm of ordinary humans. Not to mention the fleeting glimpse of an alien creature so large it could obscure Earth. Haha, what kind of genius am I? I'm just a piece of shit, sir. Jarvis didn't know how to console him. He rationally judged that even if his master spent his entire life creating a suit capable of defeating these foes, he wouldn't be able to do so. From that moment on, Tony Stark developed a fondness for alcohol. The effects of the base universe being separated from Marvel's consciousness are becoming apparent. Tony Stark, the most important protagonist in the cinematic universe, has begun to see his willpower crumble, unable to mobilize the corrective force again. He has become an ordinary person, no longer the predetermined protagonist of fatalism. Lin Hao has long since ceased to care for him, and only Ivan Vanko still harbors a lingering memory of Tony Stark. Meanwhile, Director Lin has returned to the Ring Fortress and is heading south to the Ryukyu Islands. Independence is just the beginning. The Ryukyu Islands must next break through the inevitable economic blockade imposed by the island nations and the United States. Zheng Xian, watching Chieragaki slaughtering people on the big screen, reminded Lin Hao, "You should leverage your connections with your fellow townspeople and mobilize the merchants from Fujian." The Spear Bureau, after all, represents the government. We can't overly provoke the Americans, or it could escalate into heated war. I know every country in the world can go to war with the Americans, except us. Lin Hao rolled his eyes and uttered something Zheng Xian didn't understand, because we'll be blocked. The author is taking this opportunity to complain. Don't be offended, it was inevitable. They could only stir up trouble in secret, fanning the flames and provoking war in other countries. The sky gradually brightened, and the sun rose as usual. The two massacres in the Ryukyu Islands were drawing to a close. Chieragaki, having cleared the mold base, rushed to the fields outside Naha Castle. The area was a sea of blood and corpses, with more dead than mold. After all, the total number of mold stationed in the Ryukyu Islands was less than 20,000, and most had perished with the fleet. Seeing the woman, covered in golden light, appear before them, the mercenaries, already furious, immediately turned their guns. Chieragaki waved her hand and swirled several wind blades, swirls, and harvested the lives of the mercenaries. A moment later, she walked up to the three Jebelhuds who were trying to remain calm. "Madam, the anxious Iwasaki Nagashi tried to negotiate. The nine-tailed fox asked me to tell you that she was lying to you. She never thought of giving supernatural powers to the powerful people of the island nation, because she hates the descendants of the daimyo who killed her the most. Who told you to create a permanent dynasty, kill people, destroy their hearts first?" Chieragaki repeated the lines that Nguyen had received from Lin Hao with an expressionless face. She was in no mood to appreciate the wonderful changes in the expressions of the three old guys. She waved her hand and cut off their necks. "Baga, my ancestors were commoners," was Iwasaki Nagashi's last thought. "It's just a complaint from the protagonist, there's no intention to break out of the box. The world in the book is always in the book, but I believe that sooner or later this day will also happen in reality." Chapter 287. A world where only Americans will be hurt has been achieved. A new day dawned, and the longest night for the East Asian islands finally ended. Just as the people were still reeling from the grief of the Tokyo incident, they suddenly heard an equally shocking piece of news. The Ryukyu Islands, occupied by the Japanese for over 100 years, declared independence to the world this morning. If that were all, it would certainly not detract from the attention paid to the Tokyo incident. After all, that night was truly tragic. 6 core districts vanished overnight, millions of residents were killed or injured, and the endless stream of extraordinary beings appeared like models on a catwalk, overwhelming the attention. With this level of attention, it would likely top the global trending search charts, not just the next morning, but even for a month, if that unnamed demon stopped making a big fuss. The independence of Amir Island, not a war between the 5 major powers, was expected to detract from the attention paid to the Tokyo incident? When has peace ever been upon this tiny planet? Is there ever a day when small countries or regions aren't embroiled in war? Various factions emerged one after another, and the changes of dynasties and the restoration of independence were nothing new. Most people around the world don't even know where the Ryukyu Islands are located. Geography and history aren't taught in every country. In most, these are considered elite subjects. However, the Ryukyu Independence Organization issued its Declaration of Independence today in front of the ruins of the fungus base. The person issuing the declaration was an extraordinary woman shrouded in golden light. The specially edited live broadcast footage also included footage of her single-handedly destroying the fungus base and slaughtering its soldiers early that morning. It's no surprise that these combined factors stole the spotlight from the Tokyo incident. This extraordinary woman, single-handedly slaughtering the military of a world power, brazenly flaunted her power and delivered a slap in the face to America. The world marveled at Chieragaki's strength and waited eagerly for America's next response. However, Chieragaki, unfazed, immediately released footage of the island nation's 3 largest chaebols slaughtering over 100,000 homeless people, a video she had casually filmed the previous night. Then, the islanders stranded within the Ryukyu Islands were gathered together and allowed to choose whether to become Ryukyu citizens or return to the island nation. At the same time, They actively developed diplomatic relations, welcoming global business groups to trade with the Ryukyu Islands. Each act was handled with confidence and composure, completely unfazed by any potential counterattacks from the United States or the island nations. Furthermore, the Divine Spear Bureau's ring fortress, under the guise of protection, remains suspended over the main island of the Ryukyu Islands, yet no evacuation efforts were made. Anyone with a discerning eye could see this as a warning to the United States against the draconian use of desperation. Pressure was thus building on the United States, and the world awaited a response from the former world power. However, the reconstituted U.S. Congress was mired in incessant bickering, with numerous votes and proposals falling through the cracks. Spokespeople from various departments were left issuing stern warnings every few hours. The speeches were rewritten time and again, but not a single definitive statement was heard. The question of whether to fight or not remained unresolved. After 2 or 3 days, even the slowest thinking of the Americans finally understood America's choice. They dare not fight, but to save face, they have to feign embarrassment, the embarrassment of not dragging humanity into destructive war to maintain world peace. In short, they're cowards. Capitalists will never wage a war they are doomed to fail. In recent days, America has focused its propaganda solely on Chiragaki and the various supernatural forces lurking within Earth, claiming it lost to mysterious and elusive supernatural beings due to insufficient intelligence and carelessness, completely ignoring the conflict between the two superpowers. This self-deception maintains the last veneer of world hegemony. Naturally, the other hidden protagonist won't continue to provoke America. Instead of devoting their energy and resources to a world-class war, they'd rather look up to the heavens and journey into the vast sea of stars. With spacecraft technology, star maps, and intelligence on habitable planets already in hand, only a fool would continue to focus on their tiny, broken planet. For over 2,000 years, the nations of East Asia battled each other for control of the Central Plains, yet they never set their sights on the potentially free territories of the Americas and Australia. Wang Dawen of the Yuan dynasty arrived in Darwin, Northern Australia, as early as 1332, more than 2 centuries before the Dutchman William Jans. Sadly, however, the Central Plains dynasties, dominated by corrupt scholars, adhered to pastoral policy, treating the people like livestock, bound to their land for generations to cultivate and exploit. The so-called farming and studying to pass on the family tradition meant that the children of the landlords always educated, while the tenants, who had lost their land, were responsible for cultivating the land. Landowners needed at least 3 generations of hard work to raise enough for a child's full-time education. They would rather force these people into refugees, triggering repeated dynastic changes, than allow them to leave the country to seek a living. Those who left without permission were labeled abandoners of the country, offering rewards for reporting them and making them liable to death. Regardless of the successive dynasties, the new emperors always needed Confucianists to govern them. However, the monopoly of Confucianism and Confucianism on administrative power, and the stranglehold Confucianism has placed on the nation, must never be broken. Otherwise, the foundations of millennial families would be undermined. Indeed, simply out of fear of disruption and a fear of experimentation, these corrupt Confucianists have shackled the thinking of the Chinese people for at least 6 or 7 centuries. Humans are inert, accustomed to millennia-old ways of playing, and lack the courage to try new ones. Therefore, lands far from the Central Plains are considered barbaric and undesirable. But does this mean that distant places cannot be developed? Will they necessarily burden the Central Plains dynasties? Did the Jiangnan region only begin to be developed on a large scale after the Jin dynasty? During the Qin, Han, and Tang dynasties, there was no such thing as when Huguang is prosperous, the world is well fed. Abandoning expansion simply for temporary investment, these corrupt Confucianists are not serving the country or the people, they are clearly serving themselves. In their eyes, the displaced people must die on their own soil rather than be allowed to leave the country. Going out to sea was a policy strongly opposed by the Confucian-led agricultural civilization model. Do you know why the Yuan dynasty boasted a flourishing maritime industry, but by the Ming and Qin dynasties, it was practically untouched? Zhu Yuanzhang was slandered by corrupt scholars as an uninformed peasant, and many of his policies were indeed limited. But was Kangxi, who also implemented a maritime ban, also a peasant? Was Qianlong, often hailed as the 10 perfect men, also a peasant? It was simply corrupt scholars who collectively fabricated an information cocoon for Zhu Yuanzhang to protect their family interests. Even Liu Bowen, often revered as a deity, was a Confucian disciple. Had Zhu Yuanzhang known the annual tax revenues collected by the Yuan and Southern Song dynasties from maritime trade, would this consummately pragmatic old farmer have abandoned maritime trade? He hadn't personally received the ancient texts, so how could he have known that the records of the maritime customs had been so brazenly hidden by corrupt scholars? Zhu Yuanzhang, unable to afford schooling as a child, even had his academic studies supplemented by scholars like Zhu Xing, Li Shansheng, and Song Lian. How could these scholars have possibly taught him books like biographies of merchants and a brief account of the island barbarians? Instead, they were promoting the rule of the three dynasties, exhorting him to emulate the ancient sage kings or the Han emperors when Wenjing. The central government would practice non-interventionism so that the local gentry, whose traditions of farming and studying were passed down from generation to generation, could take over local power. As the legal advisor had predicted, county magistrates would impose arbitrary taxes, with the gentry paying the full amount and the poor splitting the tax 70% to 30%. As for the Whip dynasty, the model of minority rule over the majority meant they absolutely dared not relax restrictions on Han thought and behavior, let alone allow Han Chinese to sail freely. The Eight Banners leaders even hesitated to develop firearms, which would have allowed the Han Chinese to demonstrate their combat effectiveness, instead advocating conquering the world through horseback archery. Only the red cannon, the one shot that killed Nurhaci, survived. Because it was large and difficult to manufacture, it was difficult for the Han Chinese to adopt. Therefore, once the new army emerged, the end of the Q dynasty was inevitable. A nation with a rebellious spirit would never willingly accept harm and unfair treatment after acquiring military power. Furthermore, why did the natural sciences of navigation, mathematics, and astronomy flourish during the Yuan dynasty? Because 9 Confucian scholars and 10 beggars undermined Confucianism's status. Of course, this also led to their short-lived century. The Q dynasty that chose to embrace Confucianism did manage to survive, but unfortunately, it was not a good thing for the entire nation. The agricultural civilization system advocated by Confucianism should have ended after the Song dynasty, along with the humiliated Jia royal family. This ideology lost its progressiveness and, over the next 600 or 700 years, became corrupt and stagnant, destroying the ancient great nation's hopes of conquering the sea. Having already missed so many opportunities, an ancient nation will not make the same mistake again. Wouldn't it be better to invest the energy and resources spent on a war with the Americans into interstellar exploration? Moreover, with the presence of a certain unnamed demon, even without a direct war, the Americans would continue to be in chaos. Consequently, after the Ryukyu independence incident, the two Pacific powers maintained an eerie calm. While the average person saw this as the Americans' inability to compete with a powerful transcendent Chi-era-gaki, those with a deeper understanding of international politics saw restraint on the part of the two powers. It wasn't until the SWARD suddenly announced the successful creation of a spacecraft capable of long-distance travel and the discovery of a habitable planet that some of these intelligent individuals suddenly realized why they were reluctant to further challenge their position as world hegemons. It turned out that they simply didn't want to play along with their things anymore. They were actually heading for space. The news spread, sparking renewed global discussion. The islanders suddenly realized with sadness that they had been forgotten by the world. This was difficult for some proud and arrogant islanders to accept, and the new ninja sect quietly developed among them. Baga, how dare you ignore the Yamato people, the Americans, absolutely unforgivable. Just wait, with the gift of the nine-tailed fox, I will definitely make the Americans pay. Why don't you hate the Ryokitans and the SHIE? Because they can't defeat them. Nyoun has warned them not to provoke the SHIE, because China has an even more powerful supernatural force behind it. If they cause her trouble, she will first clean up the mess. A world where only Americans will be hurt has been achieved. I was always worried that some people would mind why I didn't just write about the war between the two countries, so I explained it. For the sake of logical reasoning, I also had to explain why the SHIE gave up fighting America and chose to go interstellar. I feel a little long-winded at once, so please forgive me. Chapter 288, A Shocking Press Conference. The SHIE press conference took place at noon on October 1st. The sun blazed brightly, a sight unbearable to gaze upon, much like the nation on the verge of soaring. Spokesperson Zhao Bin, having received the manuscript in advance, was filled with disbelief. Director Zheng, this Xiaobin glanced at the manuscript in disbelief. Is this all true? Zheng Xian smiled. Of course. Did they call you here in the middle of the night to fool the world? Not unbelievable. Xiaobin, despite his years of experience in field work, was suddenly incoherent. No, I mean, this is incredibly exciting. I simply don't know how to describe how I feel right now. In the past 2 years, the emergence of numerous supernatural powers on Earth has reshaped the world's understanding of the planet. However, these things are too far removed from ordinary people. Even Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry, which openly recruits students from around the world, still cannot benefit the majority. But what the SHIE has to offer this time could usher the entire country into a new era. Come to peace of mind and continue reading as usual. Zheng Xian smiled gently. No need to answer questions today, okay? Xiaobin nodded vigorously. The 15th day of the 7th lunar month in 2010 fell on August 24th in the Gregorian calendar. Exactly 1 month and 1 week had passed, and the Ryukyu Independence Incident and the Tokyo Incident hadn't left the trending headlines yet, with the world watching the next moves of the two nations on opposite sides of the Pacific. While the newly reconstituted U.S. Congress was still debating, the SHIEA released groundbreaking news. Dear journalists, with a familiar, magnetic voice, the subtle murmurs of the press conference hall vanished, leaving only the clatter of keyboards and camera flashes. I apologize for disturbing you so late at night, Xiaobin said with a smile. I've gathered you all here today because we have something important to announce to the world. The clatter of flashes intensified, and reporters from around the world held their breath, their gaze fixed on the stage. In 3 days, the SHIEA will launch a self-developed spacecraft on Earth's first space voyage, a field trip to a habitable planet in the Andromeda Galaxy. The moment he spoke, the room erupted in laughter. Gasps echoed, the temperature at the press conference rising to a fever pitch, and the reporters taking photos were eager to snap their shutters. Though they longed to interrupt and press for details, they all knew the next announcement would be even more explosive. No picture, no truth. Xiaobin waved his hand, and the lights dimmed. Holographic projection technology revealed a deep blue, oval-shaped spacecraft to the world. This is the Pangu, the first spacecraft independently developed by the Shunmiao Bureau's Technology Development Department. The conference hall suddenly fell silent, and the world itself fell silent as well. A moment later, the world erupted in excitement. Inside, reporters abandoned restraint and order, grabbing microphones and rushing in at speeds far exceeding Usain Bolt's. The prepared security personnel immediately used themselves as shields, forming a human wall. In 3 days, SHIE soldiers will pilot the spacecraft Pangu out of the solar system and head for the Andromeda Galaxy, 2.5 million light-years away, extending humanity's footprints into outer space. Friends, all of Earth, the vast sea of stars. Xiaobin took a deep breath and thundered, it's really coming. The world fell silent again. Across the ocean, outside New York, at the headquarters of the Provisional Government of the United States. Although it was midnight, this earth-shattering news awoke the already slumbering American leaders. Are you kidding? April Fool's Day is long over, someone shouted. It's not hard to understand. Aliens have visited Earth so many times. Wouldn't it be difficult for them to obtain some spacecraft manufacturing technology? But why didn't America obtain this technology? Most of the American elite eagles were in disbelief. At that moment, someone suddenly whispered, SHIELD had contact with aliens 20 years ago, and Nick Fury had even been secretly aiding the Skrulls for 20 years. The meeting room fell silent for a moment, then an elderly white general suddenly roared, that damn nigger. He's a sinner for America. The nearby blacks, who were just trying to be polite and politically correct, all looked embarrassed. Why hadn't Nick Fury, who had been in contact with aliens for 20 years, considered retrieving the spaceship manufacturing technology? The capitalist consortium wasn't some childish superhero strutting around in tights. They understood the immense value of a planet. So, they couldn't understand why the usually astute Nick Fury hadn't been so foolish as to have failed to retrieve the spaceship manufacturing technology in 20 years? Could it be that Americans weren't as intelligent as the yellow monkeys across the ocean? Did this damn nigger think that America's geniuses couldn't digest alien technology? Damn this nigger. If Nick Fury had stood before them now, he would have been devoured alive by these American Eagle warriors. This nigger had destroyed America's hopes of interstellar progress and left it lagging behind the nation across the ocean. This only exacerbated America's current international situation. already facing widespread suspicion from its international allies for its slow response to the Ryukyu Independence Incident, SHIE's position as a world leader was now shattered by this devastating blow from the SHIEARD. It's just a spaceship, who knows if it's just a showpiece? We still possess formidable military power. The Red Eyes, unwilling to accept the end of American hegemony, issued meaningless cries. The new Congress can't argue anymore. We must act immediately. As if hearing these cries of impotent fury, Zhao Bin on TV continued, reporters, before leaving the solar system, the SHIE space exploration team will conduct a series of tests on the spacecraft in space to verify the functionality of various systems, such as the propulsion system, defense system, and weapons system. After all, this is our first time building a spacecraft. Many technologies are still a bit naive and require testing and debugging. At that moment, all the foreigners who understood this statement felt as if they had swallowed a fly, their mouths spitting with anger. Damn, this is a threat, right? This is a blatant threat. Rest assured, our country has always advocated for the peaceful development of space resources. Zhao Bin grinned, his international friends jerk off. SHIE solemnly promises that it will never be the first to use spacecraft against a country without one. Holy crap. Where on earth can we find another spacecraft besides yours? Hollywood? And what the hell is no first use? If we fire a shot at SHIE, will they bombard us with star destroyers? The foreigners wailed, and after a moment's silence, the Chinese people erupted in a roaring roar. At that moment, the land of China suddenly resounded with thunderous laughter, applause, clapping of tables, and the sudden explosion of firecrackers. Ho ha ho ha, this day has finally come. Whoever offends China will be punished, no matter how far away. After more than 300 years, we've finally become strong again. Now, let's see who dares to look down on us again. This press conference from the SHIEARD heralded the arrival of a new era. Chapter 289, Decadent Tony Stark. The SHIA press conference was held at noon, but in Los Angeles, in the West 8th District, it should have been 8 p.m. However, the American custom of observing daylight saving time begins at 2 a.m. on the second Sunday in March, advancing their clocks 1 hour. At 2 a.m. on the first Sunday in November, they advanced their clocks 1 hour. Therefore, when the SHIA press conference was held, the Los Angeles clock showed 9 p.m., perfectly timed for prime time. While the American Eagle on the East Coast had to endure a midnight thrill, Los Angeles, on the West Coast, enjoyed a thrilling moment at the height of its excitement. After a period of dead silence, the bars in the city returned to a bustle of activity, with countless glasses and bottles being hurled to the floor by angry patrons, creating a series of crackling sounds. This sound echoed with the sound of firecrackers across the ocean. The jubilation of the Chinese was matched by the rage of the Americans, creating a stark contrast. Damn the federal government. Damn those yellow monkeys. Yes, in America, no matter what happens, cursing the federal government is politically correct. Besides, with technological advancements lagging behind those of potential enemies, who else could they blame but the federal government? This was not only politically correct, but also factually correct. Let's march, yes, to protest the government's inaction. China has a spaceship, we have one too. Damn those yellow monkeys. Find them and kill them. That night, Chinese immigrants in Los Angeles and across America became targets of the rage and incompetence of the incompetent. In response to the chaos, the SHIA immediately issued a stern warning to the United States, demanding they ensure the safety of Chinese tourists. As for immigrants, upon obtaining a green card, they had already lost their Chinese citizenship. The reorganized interim government in the United States was helpless and overwhelmed. They already had little grassroots control, and the prestige was even lower than that of the previous federal government. However, the threat posed by the SHIA was undeniable. Who knew where their spaceship would choose to test its weapon systems after launch? Realizing that things could get out of control, and given the sleepless nights caused by the sudden appearance of the SHIA spaceship, the elites immediately took action. Instead of rescuing the Chinese tourists and immigrants being slaughtered by the frenzied Chinese, they immediately assembled all the country's renowned physicists, astronomers, and aerospace engineers to begin developing a national spacecraft project. If the yellow monkeys could accomplish it, why couldn't these noble white men do it? A streak of flame streaked across the sky, crossing the already chaotic Los Angeles area and heading west toward Malibu. War Machine James Rhodes landed at his friend Tony Stark's clifftop villa. During the assassination attempt on President Ellis, his Iron Man armor was stolen by the extremists, but he had narrowly escaped the disaster in Washington by being stranded in the Florida suburbs. Entering the house, wearing the armor Tony had rebuilt for him, the rich aroma of alcohol hit him. Damn, has this been turned into a winery? Mr. Rhodes, I'm glad you came to visit. Perhaps you can cheer Mr. Stark up, the artificial intelligence Jarvis said quickly. What happened? Rhodes immediately demanded. Where is Tony? He's downstairs. Mr. Stark has converted the original studio into a wine cellar. Jarvis opened the glass door at the stairwell for Rhodes. The smell of alcohol was even stronger here. Rhodes felt like he had walked into a wine vat. A man was curled up on the sofa in the corner. His hair was disheveled and he had a beard on his chin. The beard was covered in dust and alcohol, and it was emitting a strong stench. The man's clothes looked like they hadn't been changed in a long time. The smell of alcohol and sweat condensed together, and the smell was not much better than that of a homeless person under a bridge. Oh my God, you are Tony Stark. Rhodes' voice was filled with shock and anger. What's wrong with you, Mr. Rhodes? Ever since Mr. Stark witnessed the events of Tokyo that night, he's completely lost confidence, Jarvis explained. Mr. Stark believes that no matter how hard he tries, even if he spends his entire life, he won't be able to create a suit of armor capable of defeating those transcendents. Shit, Rhodes suddenly realized, but he could only lash out in anger. Damn pride, genius. He stepped forward, clad in his armor, and lifted Tony, who was curled up on the sofa, with one hand. He walked to the closet, then with his free hand, grabbed some ice water and poured it over his friend's head. He'd hurried here tonight because a large group of people were waiting for Tony Stark, the genius, at the provisional government headquarters outside New York. Now was not the time for him to become an alcoholic and lose himself. Tony Stark, I know you were once very proud, and I know you've rarely experienced setbacks in your life, but wake up. Rhodes, enraged, repeatedly grabbed ice cubes from the freezer and roughly rubbed his friend's face, irritating his alcohol-numbed nerves. Jarvis, get him some clean clothes. Rhodes, taking over the reins, ordered Jarvis, put his suit on again, and you'll take the controls. America is at a critical juncture. Everyone's waiting for him. There's no time for him to fall. Yes, Mr. Rhodes. Jarvis, with his intelligence and authority, was happy to help his master regain his composure. Tony hadn't fully sobered up when Rhodes roughly tore off his stinking clothes, dressed him in clean street clothes, and stuffed him into the suit that Jarvis had guided him towards. The two suits took off one after another, heading for New York on the East Coast. The wealthy didn't care about energy consumption, they were all about prestige. They felt like they couldn't function without circling east to west and back again twice a day. By the time they arrived at the temporary government headquarters outside New York, it was already 3 in the morning. The SHIE press conference had long since concluded, but the world was far from calm. Nearly every country was holding urgent high-level meetings to discuss the unprecedented new order. Rhodes and Jarvis, each manipulating their own suits, flew over the New York suburbs. While still airborne, they each opened their visors to allow identification by the soldiers and Secret Service on the ground. Killian had previously used the Iron Patriot to stage a Trojan horse, brazenly breaking into Air Force One and abducting President Ellis. Since then, the U.S. military, the Secret Service, and all security personnel protecting high-ranking figures have become wary of Iron Patriot suits, demanding they reveal their true appearances from a distance. Learning from their mistakes, they were terrified. Tony Stark, still hungover, doubled over and vomited upon landing, evidently taking a toll on his recent alcohol consumption. Rhodes led Tony Stark through numerous inspections before finally arriving at the temporary government offices located in the basement of the mansion. After winding through winding paths, they entered a large conference room. The room was already filled with renowned scientists, urgently summoned by the elite eagles from across America. Chapter 290. Is this a threat of war against America? As the two steel armors entered the conference room, the elderly man at the head of the oval table suddenly stood and applauded. Welcome our genius weapons inventor, Mr. Tony Stark. This man, Tom Vilsack, had been the Secretary of Agriculture. After Washington was struck by a mushroom bomb, Congress, the Pentagon, and the White House were wiped out, and the top 8 candidates eligible to succeed the president were all lost. Thus, the 9th Secretary of Agriculture, by sheer luck, became the first person in American history to hold that position and succeed the presidency. On the day Washington was attacked, he happened to be inspecting the agricultural region of the Midwest, thus escaping the disaster. Tom, treading cautiously on thin ice at this sudden rise to power, was unsure if he could make it to the other side. A mere technocrat, he was clearly ill-equipped to handle the current era of turmoil, let alone steer the already shattered ship of America out of the storm. But the conglomerates behind the scenes needed to rebuild the federal government's framework and didn't dare risk international outrage by dragging America back to the feudal family rule model. Behind the scenes, they kept their heads down. The fig leaf couldn't be lost. That's politics. With Ryukyu claiming independence and SHIE revealing their spaceship, Tom couldn't handle the situation. He could only proceed step by step, calling in experts for brainstorming. As an American genius, Tony Stark, the man who developed the groundbreaking Iron Man armor, undoubtedly held high hopes for Tom. Among American scientists and engineers, Tony Stark undoubtedly held the greatest potential to build a spaceship. After all, this was the Marvel Universe. In Avengers 3, he was able to operate Thanos' ship after only one look, and in Avengers 4, he was even able to repair the Guardians of the Galaxy's ship. Objectively speaking, Tony Stark was the most likely to build a spaceship. Unfortunately, Tony, still half drunk, hadn't recovered from his shock. His numb eyes unconsciously scanned the surroundings. Some of the group looked familiar, but many were unfamiliar. The applause only seemed to Tony a cacophony. Tony's been busy with work lately. In fact, he's been busy for almost 2 years now, and he's already exhausted. His friend Rod quickly stepped forward to cover for him, a look of deep sorrow on his face. To equip America with the power to deal with the Beyonders, Tony's been working tirelessly for 2 years, constantly upgrading his armor. This was true. Unlike the original novel, the current American military possessed more than just the war machine armor. To cope with crises, the military had established the Iron Legion. Unfortunately, Tony, the chief advisor, could never keep up with Lin Hao's pace. The armor's power had barely been increased, the military had barely set up production, and the finished product hadn't even had time to be painted, when even more powerful Beyonders descended upon America. Who could handle such a shock? Anyone with even a passing knowledge of the situation couldn't lie and ignore Tony Stark's contributions to America. Yes, Mr. Stark has worked incredibly hard, Tom sighed, a look of uncertainty on his face. But, sir, let's all start drafting a plan and discuss what's possible with current technology. Let Tony rest for a while, and he'll provide the final update. Rhodes truly cared deeply for his friend. Okay. Let's get started. With that, Tom sat back down and began to listen. He was only the Minister of Agriculture before, and he couldn't even boast a comprehensive understanding of agricultural technology, let alone spacecraft manufacturing. Boeing and the Houston Rockets, could you please introduce yourself? Faced with the pressure from the SHIE, if America could quickly produce a spacecraft, even if its performance was inferior, or even just enough to take astronauts on a short circuit within the solar system and back, the media they controlled would be able to hype it up and restore their image as a world hegemon. So the elite Eagles' countermeasures were simple: follow their example and produce a spacecraft. But the launch had to be successful, ideally orbiting the Moon and Mars. And this time, it absolutely couldn't be a simulated filming session. A SHIA ship could be observing at any moment. If their ship reached a location of the American ship's live broadcast and didn't spot the Americans, and the ship didn't appear in the American live broadcast either, that would be a complete joke. Could they hire a Hollywood special effects company to Photoshop a SHIA ship in? Listening to their clamor, a hungover Tony Stark finally regained some consciousness and learned from Jarvis what had just happened. He hadn't expected SHIA to have built a spacecraft capable of long-distance travel, which once again shattered Tony's genius. Enough, he suddenly said, interrupting the discussion of these mediocre scientists. Tony, what are your thoughts? Rhodes demanded, trying to control the pace and avoid embarrassing everyone. But who is Tony Stark? He had always looked down on mediocre scientists, but now, paralyzed by alcohol for days, his mind was turning even more frantic. With your plan, let alone getting into space, it'll explode before even reaching the stratosphere, the engineers from Boeing and the Houston Rockets flushed, clearly furious. Mr. Stark, do you have a way to build a spacecraft capable of space travel? Though Tony Stark's pride had been shattered time and again, he hadn't completely lost his scientific integrity. He patted the arc reactor on his chest and declared arrogantly, "I figured out the power source. Now it depends on the material strength and engine power, but your plan is bullshit." It wasn't a slight. In Tony Stark's eyes, these so-called experts were nothing but garbage. "You," the Boeing representative said, sneer, "then come up with a better plan. My plan is to give me a real spacecraft capable of flying, so I can dismantle it. I guarantee it can be restored in the shortest possible time." Tony Stark's arrogance was well-founded. But the question was, where would they find a spaceship that could fly? If America already had one, would they still need to come together to build a replacement? The argument was destined to lead nowhere, but then the conference room door was violently flung open. Mr. President, the SHIE has suddenly issued a new announcement, stating that a large number of serious incidents of assault against Chinese tourists have occurred in our country. They demand that we take immediate measures to protect Chinese tourists, or they will conduct premature weapons testing on spaceships. And after hearing the presidential secretary's message, the elite eagles in the conference room fell into an eerie silence. A moment later, shouting threatened to overturn the earth overhead. What does SHIE mean? Are they trying to interfere in America's internal affairs? What do you mean they're conducting weapons testing prematurely just because we can't resolve it? Are they threatening war with America? Fuck you. Let them come. America is not afraid of threats. The elite eagles in the conference room were clearly using anger to mask their inner panic. They were afraid the SHIE would actually come. "Sir, you should move to a safer area below. Also, take the launch box with you and be prepared to use it," a military general reminded Tom. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story, and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 291, The Precision Strike of the Spear Bureau. The conference room was in chaos. The elite eagles, who had just been discussing the spaceship construction plan, were stunned by the warning from the SHIE, and each one of them was filled with impotence and rage. Tony Stark, fresh from a hangover, fought back a ripping headache and immediately ordered Jarvis, "Search each state for scenes of harm to Asians. Hack into the police system and issue direct orders to the nearby patrol officers, impersonate a local police officer and warn the officers dispatched to quell the riots and protect the Asians immediately. Otherwise, all negligent officers will be fired and their benefits will be revoked." As a capitalist, Tony Stark clearly understood what mattered most to American police officers. Their jobs and the benefits provided by the police department were what mattered most to most junior officers. A job meant income, and a position meant benefits. As for promotions, was that something a commoner could dream of? He acted without averting his gaze, and the elite eagles in the conference room acquiesced. To put it bluntly, the very people who most want war to break out right now are these elite eagles, knowing full well they have a high probability of losing. Even if they manage to win, it would be a lopsided, meaningless victory. The SHIE's spacecraft would mean the North American continent's unique geographical advantage is gone, and war would inevitably spill over into the mainland, directly exposing their businesses to the devastation of war. As the saying goes, capitalists will never wage a war that loses them money. So, if they can force local police to fight tooth and nail to solve the problem with a few minor tricks, then thank goodness. Unfortunately, America has never had the concept of one family, and the outcome of the unrest depends solely on the relative strength of the weapons on both sides. This recent SHIE-generated news has deeply stung the sensitive and fragile hearts of Americans. Americans, who have always considered America the best in the world, and who, wherever they go, are treated differently simply by revealing their nationality, suddenly find their privileges shaky. How could these Americans, who had never known humility or forbearance, not be furious and terrified? Consequently, the local police officers, tricked by Jarvis into quelling the unrest, instead of bringing good news to the higher-ups, the elite eagles, only further inflamed the American population, adding fuel to the fire. How could this happen? These damned rioters, why won't they just behave? They're trying to destroy America and our industry. They all deserve to die. The high-handed elite eagles arrogantly believed that the common people should obey their will, and that any resistance was treason. They unscrupulously cursed the Americans participating in the riots, wishing a few transcendent gods would emerge and purge these unyielding social scum. Tony Stark listened quietly, unaware that his actions were not only ineffective, but also counterproductive. He, too, was an elite eagle, detached from the American common people, and shared the same arrogance. But at least he retained a modicum of conscience and refrained from cursing his fellow citizens. But conscience and morality cannot resolve the current predicament. Hours passed, and the interim government of the United States remained unable to quell the widespread and brutal targeting of Asian Americans within its borders. On the streets of Los Angeles, an Asian woman, disheveled and bleeding, fled in panic. Two black men, both grinning, pursued her. "Stop, no, no." This woman, known as the Freedom Woman Rider, had repeatedly declared her lack of freedom in her own country, and then fled to free America. On Independence Day, she held the American flag in her hands and posted numerous social media posts, expressing her loyalty to the United States. "Bless America, may the stars and stripes never fall." Now, before the flag even fell, she herself was about to do so. "Hurry up, kill her when you're done. No one will investigate what happened today." The two black men dragged the Freedom Woman Rider into an alley. Similar scenes were erupting across the United States, and the chaos was intensifying. Until SHIA issued a third notice demanding the U.S. government contain the situation. After failing to do so, SHIA brazenly announced that it would prematurely launch the Pangu spacecraft, broadcasting it live worldwide. We never imagined that Americans, who always advocate for freedom, equality, and tolerance, would vent their anger on defenseless Asian tourists and immigrants simply because SHIA built a spacecraft they don't have. Immigrants are no longer citizens, and we have no law enforcement authority, but we can still impose sanctions on criminals who harm Asian tourists who are simply visiting the United States under the principle of personal jurisdiction and international law. Yes, since the U.S. federal government is unable to protect Asian tourists, we will use our own methods to punish crimes against them. The live broadcast suddenly switched to the Pangu spacecraft's takeoff. The Pangu, measuring 1,245 meters long, 306 meters wide, and 98 meters high, took off gracefully under the control of SHIA agents. In the live footage, the engines made no discernible sound, and the massive spacecraft suddenly soared like a piece of light paper. Anti-gravity system, Tony Stark remained in the conference room. The other elite eagles had already retreated to a safer area deeper underground, but he remained. "Tony, do you want to?" Rhodes came over to persuade him. America needed Tony Stark's wisdom more than ever. SWAR won't go to war. They've already stated they will sanction crimes against Asians, meaning they'll only target those who take advantage of the chaos. Tony Stark might have become decadent, but his intelligence remained. Jarvis can accurately target criminals, so their operating system can't be any worse than Jarvis. After hearing his friend's assessment, Rhodes breathed a sigh of relief and said, "I'll report to the gentleman." As Tony Stark had predicted, the Pangu flew out of Earth and into low Earth orbit, and the live feed switched to a scene inside the spacecraft's control center. A commander-like figure decisively ordered, "Scan the entire United States and identify those committing crimes against Asians. Target them accordingly." Varying in severity, the Pangu's operating system sprang into life, countless images flashing continuously, all depicting crimes against Asians within the United States. In just over 10 seconds, the system had made its identification and assessment. Use electrical shock weapons to precisely strike the target. With a commander's command, half of the live feed shifted to an exterior view of the Pangu. A dense network of tiny metal tubes suddenly emerged from one side of the ship's hull. The next second, controlled by the ship's central control system, the tubes continuously flashed blue arcs of electricity, blasting towards the North American continent below with an unseen trajectory. In the daylight hours, the North American continent could not see the rain curtain created by the arcs. Only those who occasionally looked up could catch a fleeting, blinding flash. Suddenly, scores of people collapsed on the chaotic streets, their heads thrown back. Some convulsed, foaming at the mouth, while others collapsed to the ground, soundless. The SHIE spaceship actually gave different levels of attack according to the severity of their crimes. This is undoubtedly more rare than indiscriminate mass execution. It shows that the SHIE spaceship has advanced performance. The operating system can easily lock and efficiently analyze it, and then carry out precise strikes on this basis. Even the criminals hiding in the building could not escape. The world was silent again. SHIE did not provoke a war, but used a punishment of crime to scare the top executives of the Marvel Universe. They can fight crime today, But can they fight us tomorrow? Tony Stark in the conference room was silent for a long time with a dark face, and finally put on his armor again, leaving only one sentence for Rhodes. Come back to me when you find the real spaceship. Chapter 292, Raising the Red Flag Outside Nanximen. At 10 a.m. on October 3, the Shenmiao Bureau's independently developed spacecraft, the Pangu, officially launched, embarking on the first space voyage in human history. Having previously conducted a punishment of crime operation against the United States, the global audience no longer doubted the spacecraft's authenticity. Even those with the most severe pink eye could only silently curse that the spacecraft would disintegrate before leaving the solar system. Alice, they were doomed to disappointment. Power system normal, weapon system normal, gravity system normal, air conditioning system normal, excellent, target Mars, check in at the South Heaven Gate first. With the commander's command, the Pangu's engines ignited, and the dark blue oval hull flew towards the distant Mars. The universe is vast. If the distant sun is used as a reference point, the Pangu is no faster than a snail, but its actual speed has reached half the speed of light, so it arrived above Mars in just 530 seconds. This was only the Pangu's cruising speed. At full power, it could reach sublight speeds. It was certainly a step behind superheroes who could easily reach the speed of light through unexpected experiments. Even if they could reach the speed of light, reaching the Andromeda Galaxy, 2.54 million light-years away, would be a pipe dream. Therefore, space jump technology was essential. The Pangu's launch was broadcast live worldwide. If such a grand event were not shared, wouldn't our great nation appear petty? When palaces suddenly appeared floating above the clouds on the live broadcast, the audience on Earth was once again stunned into silence. Previously, news of a palace appearing on Mars had only circulated among high-ranking officials. The powerful wouldn't be so foolish as to spread the promise of immortality around the world. Ordinary telescopes couldn't even detect the palace protected by the formation. In fact, if Lin Hao hadn't granted permission, even a direct flight over Mars, like the Pangu, wouldn't have been able to detect the palace within the formation. Haha, I told you the authoritarian government is engaging in another shameful deception. The yellow-skinned, white-hearted freedom defenders eagerly jumped out to reiterate their sentiments. They haven't slept well in recent days, terrified of being harmed by local white and black people, or of being handed over to curry favor with the authoritarian government and imprisoned. Their minds have long been insane. Everyone on Earth knows that Mars is a barren planet with no water. How could there be such buildings and even living things on it? Can't you be more professional when you're lying? With this level of skill, you still have the nerve to call yourself a great power. The person above, if the eyes on your head are just for show, please donate them to someone who can use them. I think he has a problem with his brain, but you should keep them for yourself and don't use them to harm others. Dear viewers, I'm sure you're all as shocked and curious as I am when you see this. The news anchor smiled and revealed the information he had obtained from the SHIEAR, but in fact, as early as 3 months ago, space agencies of various countries had already filmed this complex on Mars. Everyone, please take a closer look. This complex has exactly 33 floors. Combined with the architectural style and the ancient Chinese characters on the temple plaques, we have reason to believe that this is the celestial palace in Chinese mythology. Otherwise, it would not be almost identical to the description in the myth. I know it's hard to believe, but since Asgard in Norse mythology is real, it makes sense that there is a real celestial palace on Mars. This fully demonstrates that Chinese civilization has a long history, extending its influence to Mars and even planets in other galaxies long ago. Our ancestors clearly created a brilliant interstellar civilization for us, but unfortunately, we, their unworthy descendants, have only now been able to inherit their legacy. This shows that the Xiangong on Mars has been a Chinese legacy since ancient times. Legacy XN Lin Hao, aboard the Pangu, suddenly noticed a massive surge of resentment of living beings appearing in the background. Not only were their individual numbers enormous, but their sheer volume was terrifying. Holy crap, an unexpected bonus. A rough estimate suggests that, in addition to the over 1 billion people in China, this surge encompasses almost the entire population of every other country on Earth. This shows that, with just the right traffic, a few casual remarks can infuriate the audience. How did it become your legacy? Unfortunately, between nations, the bigger the fist, the stronger the power. The SHIED has proven this with its fist as big as a casserole. Moreover, apart from the SHIED, no other country or force can go to Mars even if they want. They could only watch helplessly as the SHIA spaceship landed outside the legendary Nanshimon. Then, SHIA agents, clad in spacesuits, stepped out of the spaceship and unexpectedly performed a unique flag-raising ceremony beneath the gate. As the red flag rose, jubilation erupted across China. Amazing. They actually went to the Nanshimon to raise the flag. Look, the red flag is fluttering, indicating there's air flowing beneath the Nanshimon. That's ridiculous. Where the gods reside, there's more than just air. I'm afraid there's spiritual energy, or mortal energy. I really want to visit the heavenly palace. Add 1. Jiai. Add more clothes. My name is Hachuo, and I need more clothes too. Are you sure? Should I ask Hachuo-sensei to add more clothes? Ignoring the experienced drivers who often strayed from the topic but couldn't drive, the SHIA agents performed a brief but solemn flag-raising ceremony and posed for another group photo. Then, the Pangu spacecraft circled the 33 Heavenly Palace, declared its sovereignty, and soared into space, continuing its voyage. Just after leaving Mars orbit, the Pangu activated its space jump system. A beam of light shot out from the front of the spacecraft, and a golden honeycomb-shaped light curtain suddenly appeared in the void. The spacecraft rushed towards the hexagonal opening in the center and crashed directly into a magical space of flowing light. This is the artificial wormhole technology commonly used in the Marvel Universe, and has been repeatedly used in the film Guardians of the Galaxy. The process of traveling through the wormhole will cause passengers on the spacecraft to experience a seasickness-like effect. After traveling through this wormhole for several minutes, the Pangu arrived outside a purple planet. This is the Andromeda Galaxy, 2.54 million light-years from the solar system. The purple and black planet not far away is Morag. It is not far from Xander and is within the radiation range of Xander civilization. Seeing the Pangu appear, another smaller silver-white spacecraft sent a communication request. Lin Hao answered. A striking white crescent beard appeared in the video. Boss, Chapter 290 was originally posted at midnight, but he stayed indoors for another 10 hours. This kind of plot is so difficult to write. There's another plot before the multiverse opens, another twist. It'll make Thanos the real director of the family planning office, but not the one responsible. The goal is to create oranges grown south of the Wire River are oranges, while those grown north of the Wire River are bitter oranges effect. Chapter 293 Xander. Whitebird's ship, the Moby Dick, hovered beside the Pangu, looking rather dwarfed. Previously, he had launched a long voyage under the guise of Hogwarts, in front of high-ranking officials from both America and Britain, without causing widespread public concern. While the various nations were aware of the existence of a group of magicians on Earth possessing spaceships, they considered them two separate entities, and their excitement at the time was less pronounced than the recent discovery that SHIE had also developed spaceships. Whitebird's voyage was naturally orchestrated by Lin Hao, to gather information for him and serve as a vanguard for SHIE's interstellar expansion. Boss, the Power Stone should still be in the temple below. Ronan Akri hasn't made any significant moves recently, and there's no news of Thanos in the Andromeda Galaxy. Whitebird explained to Lin Hao his recent findings. The two ships, maintaining communication, descended upon the desolate planet of Morag and hovered directly above the temple. Morag was once a vibrant planet, home to an intelligent race similar in size and appearance to Earthlings. However, for unknown reasons, they abandoned it. Upon arriving there, Lin Hao discovered that the environment was damaged. The air contained some elements harmful to Earthlings, but the aliens, with their different physiques, could tolerate them. Furthermore, the water resources were depleted. The cost of renovation is too high. Let's seize a planet with a better environment, Lin Hao said, abandoning the idea of seizing Morag. His colleagues ignored Director Lin's mention of the verb seize, taking it for granted. At most, they wouldn't seize the poor, but they could target the Kree, who controlled countless resource-rich planets. After all, they had previously offended Director Lin. The Kree had been the dominant civilization for millions of years. It was time they knew who was the new boss of the universe. A flying vehicle brought Lin Hao and a team of SHIE colleagues to the temple entrance. With a wave of his hand, the door magically opened. The Power Stone was housed within a purple glowing energy device. This device could only ward off the small creatures on Morag. Any alien could easily extract it. Even an alien capable of interstellar travel couldn't afford a few of Star-Lord's gravity generators. Lin Hao didn't need such things. With a flick of his finger, a blast of sword energy sliced through the purple shield. Then, With a wave of his hand, the hollow sphere containing the Power Stone flew into his palm. Let's go. This planet has no other value. The Power Stone on Morag is also one of the rewards in Marvel's Newbie Village, and it's the most valuable one. The prerequisite is either a spaceship and a star map, or mastering the space magic of Camartage. Next, go to Xander and search for information on Ronan and Thanos. If you can't find any, go directly to the Kree's home planet, Hala. It's time to make the Supreme Intelligence bleed. Whether he remembers me or not, I remember him. Last time, when searching for the Kree's underground city on Earth, the Supreme Intelligence crawled over along the network cable and forged 2 Captain Marvels, engaging Lin Hao in a lengthy battle. While Lin Hao actually benefited more, was that really how it was calculated? The Supreme Wisdom only lost part of its body, but Director Lin lost the most precious time of his life. He must be dealt with. With the advent of space jump technology, interstellar travel is no longer a long, tedious process. As long as one is willing to spend money and doesn't mind the depletion of fuel and equipment, one can frequently jump and shorten the journey. Shortly after leaving Morag, the Penguin Moby Dick appeared in space outside Xander. Xander, a famous planet in the Andromeda Galaxy, is guarded by the Nova Corps and is also one of the 9 realms. Before Odin's death, the powerful figures of the universe wouldn't bother looking for excitement. Therefore, the rules are quite strict. Spacecraft traveling between the 2 planets must dock outside the Nova Corps defenses. Failure to do so would be considered a provocation to Xander. Lin Hao had simply come to gather information and take his colleagues on an autumn outing to explore the surroundings. He hadn't intentionally broken these rules. The Earthlings thought the Pangu was enormous, but insignificant in interstellar space, so they avoided the cliched show-off and Star Destroyer slapping them in the face drama. The spaceship landed in a designated parking area, leaving a team to guard it while Lin Hao led the others onto the streets of Xander. Cities on this planet tend to be arranged in the shape of a 5-pointed star. The steel jungle is dotted with green and red vegetation. The streets are immaculate, and the pedestrians are diverse, clearly from different civilizations, giving it an interstellar feel. Perhaps because the better science fiction works come from countries guided by capitalist ideology, the alien cities these authors create are generally based on metropolitan settings. Some works even go so far as to create a one-planet, one-city system, with the names of civilizations, planets, and even cities all sharing the same name. It's as if the authors didn't bother with naming. The majority of the planet's population is concentrated in one or several megacities, while the rest is either slums or chaotic, lawless areas. It was as if they carried the inherent arrogance of the urban elite toward the rural dwellers of the capitalist world. After personal observation, Lin Hao discovered the same situation on Xander. With only a few prominent metropolises, the rest remained largely undeveloped, with a shockingly low land use rate. Boss, Xander went through the same process as Earth before embarking on interstellar colonization. However, after the start of interstellar colonization, a large number of people migrated to new, habitable planets, and environmental governance began on their home planet, explained Whitebeard, who had been there several times before. Led by Whitebeard, the vanguard, the group settled in a hotel before exploring the more volatile areas. Wukong, let me tell you, this thing is truly valuable. A young man with blonde hair, who looked almost indistinguishable from Earth, was trying to persuade a dark-haired Asian teenager to buy a piece of metal he held, which looked incredibly old. This is a treasure I finally managed to obtain from Capri. Haha, Uncle Peter, are you trying to trick me again? The dark-haired teenager surprisingly had a flexible tail growing from his butt. On Earth, such a design would undoubtedly draw astonishment, but this was an alien city, teeming with bizarre creatures. To them, Goku seemed strangely normal. The young man with blonde hair and a face virtually indistinguishable from Earth's was Star-Lord Peter Quill, a renowned interstellar thief. Abducted by interstellar marauders as a child, Peter had long since developed a host of bad habits. How could he possibly be so unkind as to deceive a child? Chapter 294 Star-Lord, Whitebeard Dad, are you still in need of a son? Star-Lord Peter Quill is a stylish extraterrestrial hybrid. His mother, an Earthling, died of cancer, the Marvel Universe's most incurable disease, a condition that even the Celestials, despite billions of years of existence, can't cure. The Celestials said, I'll destroy or even create a planet, but forget about cancer. His father's origins are even more remarkable, a planet with life, rare in the entire universe, capable of both human and sphere life. This sphere has lived for millions of years, transforming into men from various civilizations and seeking out women on corresponding planets. He doesn't take responsibility for the women involved, only asking them to bear him children. Over time, Star-Lord's father devoured numerous planets, using his children as power banks to replenish his energy. After Star-Lord's mother's death, his father, Ego, hired a Ravager Yondu to bring Star-Lord to Earth. Unexpectedly, Yondu developed compassion for Star-Lord and, unwilling to hand him over to Ego, adopted him. During this time period, Star-Lord had just separated from Yondu's ship and was setting off on his own. He had wandered to Xander, accumulating capital to purchase his own ship. Interstellar pirates were not much different from their planetary counterparts. To sail, they needed a ship. Pirates on planets might even try drifting in a large barrel, but that wasn't possible in space. Every planet was an isolated island, stranded on one. Without a ship, they couldn't leave. Every interstellar civilization has its share of famous figures who disappeared, lost on unknown planets and died alone. A select few might become guides to indigenous civilizations, becoming another mythical creation god. After escaping Yondu's ship, Star-Lord, through numerous deceptions, finally arrived on Xander, hoping to make his first fortune. Upon arriving on Xander, Whitebeard and Goku unexpectedly encountered this Earthling, who was carrying an old-fashioned Walkman and cassette tapes. From then on, Star-Lord became friendly and approachable. He had originally planned to steal Whitebeard's spaceship, but when he saw Goku slap a 10-meter-tall alien warrior, he naturally changed his mind and resorted to a technical trick. Communication barriers were non-existent. In the Marvel Universe, English is not only the universal language on Earth, but also the universal language. "Peter, are you trying to cheat Goku out of his pocket money again?" Whitebeard approached. His towering stature made him inconspicuous even on Xander, and he wouldn't be met with strange stares from Earth. Honestly, Whitebeard and Goku were happier on other planets than on Earth, as they both had a gene for freedom and adventure. Earth's worldly gaze ultimately placed a yoke on them. Upon hearing this, Star-Lord lost his composure. Whose kid gets pocket money in the hundreds of millions? Having lost his parents at a young age and been raised by a group of interstellar pirates, Star-Lord was undoubtedly broke. The money he had accumulated over the years wouldn't even reach the 10,000 mark. Ever since he heard Goku had billions of pocket money on his card, he'd been weeping with envy and drooling with greed. Unfortunately, no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't defeat the 7 or 8-year-old Goku. "Whitebeard, are you still in need of a son?" the unscrupulous Star-Lord half-joked. "He is," Lin Hao answered for Whitebeard. Seeing this, Whitebeard naturally smiled and agreed. "Gaohua, I finally have a son." The clone had the same talents and personality as the original. Even in the Marvel Universe, Whitebeard hadn't forgotten his dream of raising a big family. "Peter, from now on, you're my eldest son." Star-Lord was confused, but he quickly realized, "Do I have pocket money too?" "Yes, but you have to go and get it first. Once you do, I'll give you a bigger share." This is how pirates raise their sons. But don't bully the weak. If you're going to rob those evil scum. They have more money. "Hey, I like to rob rich scum." Star-Lord wasn't a good guy either. Coming from a poor background, he wouldn't have sympathized with a playboy unless the editor had forced him to. "Find a bar," Lin Hao instructed Whitebeard. Star-Lord, previously preoccupied with money, only then noticed a new group of people around Whitebeard, a group that looked remarkably like Earthlings. "Hey, are you guys from Earth too?" he approached with a familiar air. "My name is Peter Quill, from Missouri." Having been taken away by Yondu at a young age, Star-Lord hadn't developed a sense of national identity. He had always considered himself a Missourian, even believing Missouri to be a country in itself. This perception persisted even when he introduced himself to Tony Stark and Spider-Man in Avengers 3. "Yes, we're Earthlings, from China," Lin Hao observed Star-Lord, a hint of a smile in his eyes. This was his reaction whenever he found a useful tool. Whitebeard, the newly adopted son's father, saw this, not only without irritation, but actually saw it as an opportunity for Star-Lord. It was well known that Director Lin was generous to his own people, even those with tools would receive benefits. "Huaxia? I've heard of this country." Actually, he hadn't. He didn't even know Missouri was part of the United States, let alone China, a country he hadn't even considered a distant memory. "Really? What a coincidence," a grinning Lin Hao suddenly blurted out. "Peter, I need a favor." Oh, Star-Lord's smile faded. A bank card from Xander appeared before him. Star-Lord's expression instantly changed, and he spoke righteously. "We're all from Earth, so I'll definitely help you. Go spread the word that a human from Earth has obtained the Power Stone and is heading to the Kree's home planet, Hala," Lin Hao said with a smile. "As the saying goes, every rat has its own way." Star-Lord, having spent years roaming the universe with Yondu and his gang of plunderers, must know many connections, channels that a novice like Whitebeard wouldn't be able to master in such a short time. Did Star-Lord really think that just because he adopted him as his godson, he'd be all over Whitebeard? Right now, he's only in it for the money. Unless Whitebeard can charm him with his personality, don't expect this deeply insecure guy to confide in you. "No problem, just wait." Star-Lord took off running. His first destination wasn't a bar or a black market, but a bank. After checking, he discovered 5,000 Xander currency, and his brows lit up. A big client, a wealthy man, Star-Lord decided to get down to business rather than run with the money. This amount wasn't enough to buy a spaceship, so he had to keep this lavish client in his sight. And so, Lin Hao's message spread from Xander to the surrounding star regions. The universe is vast. Even Lin Hao, who had defeated a single Eternal and Celestial Supreme, was limited by its size. Rather than wasting time searching for someone, it was better to lure them out. The Infinity Stones are among the most powerful items in the Marvel Universe, but those privy to this information are all powerful individuals or possess powerful legacy. When this news spreads, those unaware, like Star-Lord at this moment, will be indifferent. However, those with inside knowledge will inevitably take action. Chapter 295 Director Lin's Nest is very effective. The Marvel Cinematic Universe is designated Earth 199,999, while Lin Hao's base universe was previously designated Earth 10,086, with many plot differences. For example, at the end of the film Captain Marvel, Carol travels to the Kree homeworld of Hala and destroys the Supreme Intelligence, hoping the Kree will be freed from the control of artificial intelligence, learning to be independent and independently advancing their civilization. The opposite happens. The Kree, accustomed to being told what to do, are completely unable to adapt to life without the Supreme Intelligence. Their technology, politics, and culture come to a complete standstill, ultimately culminating in the extinction of the stars in their home system. The Kree's two suns, both spiritual and physical, are extinguished. However, in the base universe, perhaps due to some of the comic book references, the Kree Supreme Intelligence survives, at least not completely. This entity, possessing both life and electronic programming, can apparently be reprogrammed to reincarnate. Carol, upon receiving the news, did not return. The destruction of the Supreme Intelligence was driven in part by the rage of the Beacon of Freedom nation's souls being controlled by evil aliens, and in part by the desire to grant the Kree the freedom of choice, driven by their self-proclaimed human rights defenders. Unexpectedly, the Kree would so degenerate, completely ignoring the good intentions of Carol, the Cosmic Police, and happily welcomed their own Emperor back. Since this was the Kree's free choice, Carol, a firm believer in American freedom, could not afford to go and kill them again, otherwise she would become a villain. This time, receiving Lin Hao's special message from the cosmic internet, she immediately decided to return to Hala. The Marvel Universe boasts not only light-speed travel and space jump technology, but also another crucial technology supporting the development of interstellar civilization, quantum communication. For any intelligent race seeking to advance civilization, technological innovation in transportation and communications is essential. Only when Homo sapiens invented boats and vehicles, overcoming the limitations of water and improving road transportation efficiency, did primitive society establish the foundation for its transition to a slave society. Otherwise, a primitive tribe of dozens or hundreds of people would be confined to an area of less than a few dozen miles, never seeing anyone from other tribes. How could wars break out? How could slaves be captured through war? As boats and vehicles became increasingly advanced, intelligent species were able to spread their reach across the planet. At this point, the formation of a centralized organization necessitated efficient communication. Otherwise, communication would rely entirely on shouting, and at best, civilizations would only be able to form tribal or village-level structures. Upon entering interstellar space, if communication issues could not be resolved, civilizations would either become wandering civilizations separated from their home planet, or a rift would inevitably develop between the colonized planet and the home planet, leading to the colonists gradually developing desires for independence. Isn't America a vivid example? If airplanes had been invented 400 or 500 years earlier, the 13 North American colonies would have remained under British control forever, with no desire for independence, and perhaps even the formation of a single American nation. Marvel's editors recognized this, and so, in the interstellar landscapes released in the 1960s and 1970s, they prepared for alien civilizations spanning multiple star regions with technologies like speed of light travel, space jumps, and quantum communication. Based on quantum communication, several major civilizations in the universe took the lead in developing a cosmic version of the Internet. Earthlings? Are there other Earthlings appearing in space? Carol wondered from within the spaceship. The Power Stone? Could it be the legendary Infinity Stone? The three elements of this news, Earthlings, Planet Hala, and Power Stone, each struck a chord with Carol, and she found no reason not to take a look. Across the universe, aboard the Sanctuary II, Thanos received the same news. The Power Stone has appeared, and I need you to bring it back for me. Seated on his floating throne, Thanos surveyed his subordinates and two adopted daughters, who were either bowing or kneeling. His throne was not only equipped with a variety of powerful weaponry, but also capable of independently traversing the universe, effectively acting as a small spaceship. "Father, please let me go," Nebula quickly asserted herself, eagerly saying, "I will definitely bring back the Power Stone for you." Gamora was a step behind, but also quickly declared, "Father, I am willing to go for you." Thanos nodded in satisfaction, a gentle smile in his eyes as he looked at Gamora. He truly treated Gamora as his own daughter and gave her his unconditional fatherly love. Some believe Thanos is acting, a lifelong act. But with the power of the Infinity Stones, he shouldn't be deceived by false feelings. So, Thanos probably wasn't acting. At most, he was deliberately raising such a daughter with genuine affection, even overcoming his subconscious tendency to treat Gamora as a mere tool. Gamora didn't know Thanos' true intentions, but her keen intuition informed her that he had other intentions for her. While she pretended to obey, she was actually looking for a way to escape her perverted father, but Nebula's eyes, upon seeing this, sent her into a frenzy of jealousy. "Why do you, Father, only love you and not me? Why do you discard the very things I've strived for? As the saying goes, those who can't have it are restless, while those who are favored are fearless." Nebula couldn't understand why her father treated Gamora differently, treating her with such indifference, even though they were both goddaughters and the adjective hadn't been turned into a verb. That's why Nebula had spent years desperately trying to prove she was stronger, more obedient, and more useful than Gamora. Poor girl, she just wanted to be a tool, and Thanos didn't even give her a chance. This time, Thanos didn't give Nebula a chance either, nor did he give his sister, Gamora, a chance. This Earthling has the Power Stone and is targeting the Kree homeworld. He must be quite powerful. As he spoke, Thanos looked at Ebony Maw and Corvus Glaive and ordered them, "You two go." Corvus Glaive is Thanos' most powerful henchman, second only to Thanos himself. He possesses super strength, super healing powers, and a blade that contains his soul. As long as the blade remains intact, his soul remains. And his body can heal infinitely. As the leader of the Black Order, Corvus Glaive has conquered countless planets for Thanos, making invaluable contributions. Ebony Maw is Thanos' most powerful sorcerer, possessing the ability to manipulate speech, allowing him to control a person's mind through words. Unleashing this one attack, one magic combination, Thanos believes he's capable of dealing with most of the universe's most powerful forces. Director Lin's work is working wonders. Chapter 296 Director Lin riding on the clouds. As the news spread, the Kree, one of the main protagonists, naturally caught wind of it. Initially, they didn't care. After all, as a dominant civilization in the universe, why would they pay attention to such rumors? If a random internet rumor could cause them to mobilize their forces, it would be a gross underestimation of their status as a dominant civilization. It wasn't until the Supreme Intelligence suddenly and unexpectedly ordered the legions to withdraw their defenses, declaring a state of war on Hala, that the Kree, deeply shocked, took action. The Kree's sudden military mobilization alarmed several other civilizations of similar size, setting off a chain reaction that shook the entire universe. Corvus Glaive and Ebony Maw had already set out, and Thanos, still at Sanctuary 2, was stunned by the latest developments. Is it because of the Infinity Stones? Thanos pondered for a moment, then shook his head decisively. Ronan doesn't have the ability to mobilize so many legions. The one who could do all this must be the computer, So it's because of that Earthling, they're so afraid of that Earthling. Have they met him before? As someone cursed by knowledge, Thanos' IQ, like Tony Stark's, ranks among the highest in the Marvel Universe. He quickly deduced the answer. Interesting, Thanos chuckled and immediately ordered, full speed to Hala. If that Earthling could be so powerful that the Supreme Intelligence feared him, then Corvus Glaive and Ebony Maw's journey would be impossible. The 6 Infinity Stones were essential tools for Thanos to realize his ideals. He was determined to obtain them, and no one could stop him. After a few days of touring Xander with his colleagues from the SHIE, Lin Hao departed for Hala. The Nova Corps on Xander were unaware that the Earthlings, who had put the Kree on high alert and the entire universe on edge, were leisurely strolling around their base camp. The information on StarNet didn't reveal the Earthlings' appearance, and the Pangu wasn't so naive as to fill out real information when entering Xander. As soon as it cleared Xander's defenses, it began a space jump. This time, the distance was considerable, requiring multiple jumps before reaching the system containing Hala. Upon exiting the wormhole, the Pangu sounded a piercing alarm. Ship locked, shields automatically deployed, a dense array of ships, all of a relatively uniform design, appeared on the control center's large screen. They were the main force of the Kree. As the dominant power in the universe, having developed for millions of years, the Kree's war capabilities were definitely not as utterly ruthless as depicted in the movies, where Carol alone could render them defenseless. Lin Hao, staring at the fleet that practically filled the space surrounding Hala, couldn't help but grumble, "Tisk, tisk, it turns out that funding is the only metric determining combat effectiveness, given the limited length of comics and the budget constraints of movies. A civilization so dominant in the universe had been reduced to a makeshift ensemble, relying on a single Team Marvel to keep things moving." Witnessing the Kree army with his own eyes, Lin Hao smiled with satisfaction. He turned to the commander of the Pangu and said, "See? From now on, it's all ours." The commander was about to nod happily, but his expression suddenly changed, and he looked at Lin Hao pitifully. "Director, please be gentle, why panic? We can just break it and then repair it." Lin Hao simply waved his hand. Within the galaxy, not only were the Kree rushing back to defend themselves, but also lone warriors and other major and minor forces in the universe who had come to observe the excitement. Anyone with a little access to information, having learned of the Kree's grand movement, could not help but rush to watch. They wanted to see just how powerful the legendary Earthlings were, that they could frighten the Kree into urgently dispatching troops to defend themselves. Thanos and Carol were also among the fleet of ships observing the excitement. Carol's ship was small and inconspicuous, while the Temple II, as large as a mountain and with a formidable reputation, was immediately recognized. "It's Thanos. He's here too." Stark-Akkad, the leader of the Reavers, suddenly felt that today's events were becoming increasingly unusual. The mighty Kree mobilized such a large force, surrounded by numerous cosmic powers, such as the Sovereigns, Xander, Asgardians, and even the mysterious Autocorp Corporation, founded by the Supreme Evolutionary. As the saying goes, a single move can affect the entire body. Lin Hao's casually thrown bait set off a chain reaction, attracting nearly every reputable force in the universe. Civilizations too backward to connect to the interstellar network, such as Earth, were naturally unaware of what was happening in the universe. Forces connected but less powerful knew better and would at most watch the live stream, not be foolish enough to come to the scene. Fuel costs are expensive. Star-Lord, the old boss, who had done Lin Hao a favor, pestered him aboard the Pangu spacecraft, hoping to make some extra money from the powerful boss. He had never expected to encounter such an exciting scene. "It seems the Kree have something important to do today. Why don't we leave first and come back in a few days?" Star-Lord hadn't yet realized that the Kree were waiting for the very person he was trying to curry favor with. He didn't know what the Power Stone was and assumed Lin Hao had gone to Hara to complete a deal, paying him to deliver a message, perhaps using it as a secret code, much like those cosmic thieves. The Kree's current posture made it clear what kind of person they were wary of. And they were even riding on the same spaceship with him? Lin Hao turned, glanced at the terrified Star-Lord, and smiled. "It's all your fault they're here today." Star-Lord said, dumbfounded, his eyes glazed over. "You, activate the shield," Lin Hao commanded, then vanished. A pristine white cloud suddenly appeared in the cosmic void, instantly capturing all eyes. Atop the cloud stood a figure. Compared to the gargantuan aliens, this figure was far from towering, yet he stood unsteadily on the seemingly light cloud. No spaceship, no throne, no metal skateboard. He wore only a long white robe, glasses perched on his nose, and his hands tucked into his large pockets. Interesting, Thanos almost instantly confirmed that this person was the Earthling mentioned in the news. He could also appear in space without any equipment because his skin was immune to cosmic radiation, and his organs could automatically circulate and capture cosmic energy to sustain consumption. He could survive in any cosmic environment without food or water. However, to stabilize his body like this person, unaffected by the weak yet chaotic gravity around him, he would either have to sit on a throne, wear golden armor, or use magic to block the surrounding gravity. In short, any object in space requires some force to maintain a relatively stable position, because the universe itself is constantly in motion, planets, stars, and galaxies. Even these massive celestial bodies are constantly moving under the influence of gravity, let alone smaller creatures. Thanos immediately set his sights on the white clouds at Lin Hao's feet. Clearly, this was the other person's support. He was not yet familiar with Earth culture, so he couldn't recognize it. Carol, who had also arrived outside of Hala, gradually found the answer from her memories. Clouds of Asian faces, could it be the flying clouds from Chinese mythology? But even those alien gods can't float in space without oxygen tanks. Chapter 297 Carol, is this magic? Our Eastern gods so powerful? Deep in space, Lin Hao stood atop a white cloud, casually dressed and with a languid demeanor. Beyond the distant planet of Hala, the Kree army stood in full battle formation. The moment Lin Hao appeared, all warships received the command from the Supreme Intelligence. Destroy him. In an instant, the Kree ships began to flash. Some remained in orbit around Hala, while others approached Lin Hao, forming a hemisphere. Still others dispersed, blocking Lin Hao's retreat from afar. The main guns of each ship charged, and the mountain-sized ships unleashed beams of energy as thick as rivers, their target a life form as tiny as dust. The energy beams from the ships on the hemisphere converged at a single point, like a river entering the sea, unstoppable. From Lin Hao's appearance, to the Supreme Intelligence's command, to the Kree army's relentless attack, the entire process took mere seconds. The Kree soldiers were completely bewildered as to why the Supreme Intelligence would mobilize such a massive force against a mere Earthling. However, the Supreme Intelligence was their faith, their infallible truth, so understanding was unnecessary. They simply followed orders. For millions of years, the Kree had grown accustomed to a relaxed life, freeing themselves from independent thought and leaving all problems to the Supreme Intelligence. Even through physiological adjustments, their brains had long since lost the ability to think independently, strengthening only the ability to respond to commands. Prolonged disuse of an organ in an intelligent organism inevitably leads to its stagnation or even atrophy, and the same is true for the brain. However, it cannot be denied that the Kree's forget-thinking, choose-only execution social model has indeed reduced or even eliminated interspecies conflict and greatly improved the efficiency of the entire civilization. Since the advent of the Supreme Intelligence, the highly efficient Kree civilization has embarked on the path to universal dominance. As a common intelligent species without superpowers, the Kree relied on this highly efficient model to defeat the Skrulls, who could copy memories, replicate abilities, and impersonate other species. They also outlasted the gifted Eternal Titans. Even the Mackerel, who could grant wishes and understand the laws of causality, were unable to challenge Kree civilization's dominance. In this sense, Supreme Intelligence holds positive significance for the Kree. However, a civilization that pins all its hopes on a single entity is inherently fragile. Its current strength stems from a history of failure. Once faced, its doom will follow. The Kree and Captain Marvel 2 are on the verge of extinction. A civilization that had dominated the universe for 1,000,000 years, only to have its supreme intelligence destroyed by a decapitation, wiping out 1,000,000 years of accumulation in just 30 years. For a civilization to survive and progress, it must possess an indomitable spirit and a core of unyielding determination. A nation thrives through adversity is not just a self-deprecating cliché. The Kree's actions also shocked the other forces watching from nearby space. They hadn't expected the Kree to mobilize their entire forces to defend their homeworld just for a single, skinny Earthling. However, what followed was even more shocking, shaking their very perceptions. The Earthling, perched on the clouds, unhurriedly pulled his right hand from his pocket and gently waved it at the incoming beams of energy. Countless beams of light mysteriously turned, returning to their original path and shooting towards the Kree ship, even faster than before. Shield! Nearly every Kree commander on board roared. Fortunately, they were professional soldiers, seasoned by years of war and well-established combat protocols. Before entering the battle, their ships had already deployed their energy shields. The full force of the main guns suddenly turned and struck them again, draining the energy from the attacking Kree ships. Their shields flickered violently, appearing to be on the verge of collapse. How did they do that? Thanos, watching from within Temple II, frowned, puzzled. He sensed no magical fluctuations or supernatural reactions from Lin Hao, and he didn't seem to possess any special gadgets. Even if he possessed a divine weapon, there should have been energy fluctuations. The power of the gods in the Marvel Universe was, to put it simply, the manipulation of some kind of energy, impossible to conceal from him, the one cursed by knowledge. Even Thanos couldn't understand it, let alone the others observing. Carol, aboard the small spaceship, stared blankly at the screen of light, incredulous. Is this some kind of magical power? This was ridiculous. Throughout her years of wandering the universe, she had visited the Council of the Gods stationed on Earth. Carol had met and sparred with all the gods from Earth's myths and legends. None of them could defeat her. Even the gods of the so-called heaven of Eastern mythology, combined, were no match for her. Thunder God, Guangguang, and the Nanji Xianwang were all defeated by her. Even the Jade Emperor, the supreme leader, was forced to retreat into seclusion. Carol's light speed alone was unstoppable for even a single deity in heaven. When did Eastern gods possess such immortal arts? It's no wonder she couldn't comprehend them, because the techniques Lin Hao employed simply weren't within the realm of the Marvel Universe's understanding of the rules and forces. They were derived from the 36 celestial gang techniques, known as soaring clouds and driving mist and returning wind and fire, hidden within the Shushan Mountains of the Chinese Paladin universe. If this were a true universe, it would necessarily encompass all the rules. As the saying goes, the Great Dao has 3,000, with 3,000 being an imaginary number representing infinity. But this is a universe created by Westerners, one rife with arrogance and prejudice. Not to mention that Marvel editors simply don't understand Eastern culture. Even if there were a few runners with deep research, they wouldn't be able to infuse the essence of Eastern culture into the Marvel universe. They'd be considered conscientious not to take the opportunity to smear it. The rules of the Marvel universe don't originally encompass these imported techniques, so how could anyone living within it understand something that didn't exist? The 36 celestial gang techniques and the 72 Disha techniques are magical techniques from Taoist mythology, mentioned in many classical legends and tales, until the Qing dynasty's comprehensive mirror of gods and immortals integrated them. These contain both the great Dao of cultivation and the art of life and death. While the immortals in the world of Xianjian are weak, the Taoist texts of Yuanchu adhere to the principles of the great Dao. After all, the great Dao leads to the same destination, and everyone in the greater thousand worlds and the lesser thousand worlds has the right to seek the Dao. However, those living in different worlds are limited by their own limitations. Even if you are given the texts in a world with absolute communication between heaven and earth, you will not be able to achieve results. In a world with weak spiritual power, the power of magical skills is inevitably weakened. Lin Hao values the contents of Jiang Ming's memories more than the various sword-controlling techniques of Yuanchu. However, the great Dao is elusive, and those seeking it must diligently pursue it. Even Jiang Ming, the designated leader of Yuanchu, has only a superficial understanding of these Taoist texts. Lin Hao, who has never encountered a true cultivation method, can only grope his way through them. Furthermore, everyone's Dao is different, and everyone's understanding of the Dao is also unique. On the path to the Dao, one can only learn from others' understandings, otherwise one will be trapped and unable to achieve success. After receiving the 36 heavenly gang techniques, Lin Hao first studied the technique of riding on clouds and mist. It's simply awesome. In this technique, clouds and mist are merely superficial representations. The essence lies in the understanding and control of space and speed. As the saying goes, in the morning, I travel to the North Sea, and by evening, I reach Kangwu. What is transformed is space and the time taken to complete the process. Every practitioner pursuing the great Dao is constrained by their past understanding and the fundamental rules of the world they inhabit. Unless one's true spirit is extinguished, even after numerous reincarnations, upon attaining enlightenment, all past experiences will become part of one's foundation, becoming part of their true self. Lin Hao cannot and need not reject the past he has experienced in the Marvel Universe. All of this will serve as nourishment for the future development of his own great Dao. Therefore, his riding on clouds and mist is bound to be different from those in other worlds, reflecting his existing understanding of the universe. The same is true of returning wind and returning fire, which is no longer limited to the two specific energy forms of wind and fire. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story, and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 298, Magic Modified Version of Flying Sand and Rocks. Lin Hao's understanding of returning wind and returning fire is essentially the control of energy, reversal, acceleration, and catalysis. This is why he could effortlessly return the Kree main gun fire with a wave of his hand. While understanding the rules is a prerequisite for practicing magical arts, the specific power they can unleash depends on the practitioner's spiritual cultivation. Spiritual cultivation is fundamental, with magical techniques serving only as a safeguard. Although Lin Hao's exposure to spiritual energy is relatively short, his exceptional constitution makes him a truly gifted individual. With his previous accumulation and the spiritual energy seed, his spiritual cultivation has rapidly advanced. Furthermore, he possesses the powerful support of transforming the void into reality and the power of time, two magical techniques. Once one understands the rules, proficiency can rapidly improve. Unfortunately, understanding the Dao doesn't allow one to directly intercept the future with the power of time. It seems the time bundle's power of time is merely a manifestation of the laws of time, not the full scope of them. How can one comprehend the Dao beyond time and space? What a long and arduous journey. Lin Hao sighed from the clouds. He felt as though he was still countless miles away from the boundless avenue, yet all the intelligent beings in outer space on the planet Hala now regarded him as a deity. No, few of the so-called gods could so easily withstand a barrage of main gun fire from 1/3 of the flagship ships of a dominant civilization. Thanos couldn't do it, Carol couldn't do it, Ego, who had a clone hidden aboard a space pirate ship, couldn't do it, and even Odin, the God King who appeared to be a spectator but was actually cheering his boss on, couldn't do it even in his prime. Because in the Marvel Universe, aside from a few conceptual gods, all other superheroes and supervillains adhere to the scientific principle of quantitative change leads to qualitative change, or the principle of mutual restraint between superpowers. Simply put, aside from the invulnerable conceptual gods, everyone else can be defeated by the ant-many swarms kill elephant method. Whether it's through technology, magic, divine power, or supernatural powers, the essence is all energy. Given enough energy, the universe can explode. After the brief attack, a deathly silence fell over the space beyond Hala, and all the creatures aboard the spacecraft were hushed in an eerie stillness. No way. Are Earthlings that powerful? You're kidding. Isn't Earth just one of the 9 realms? Even Odin of Asgard couldn't pull that off. That's 1/3 of the Kree's main battleships. Look at this Earthling stance. Can't a few more strikes wipe out the entire Kree army? Are the Kree already so weak? The various cosmic powers observing the battle began to doubt the Kree's current status as the dominant power of the universe. After all, Lin Hao's display of power was too astonishing. But a moment later, they dismissed such thoughts. The Kree's external conquests hadn't ceased, nor had they ceased their efforts to eliminate the remaining Skrull forces. Just recently, an interstellar civilization that had provoked the Kree was destroyed. The Kree hadn't weakened, nor had they given up. This only proved that the Earthling before them was too strong. Everything happened in a flash. The Kree's main battleship only lost a little over half its energy and remained undamaged. Therefore, the Supreme Intelligence quickly issued new orders. Spread out, send fighters into close combat. All members of the surprise team, mobilize and annihilate the enemy beyond their home planet. Since the enemy possessed the uncanny ability to control their main guns, they would have to close the distance and engage in a war of attrition. No powerful being possessed unlimited energy and stamina. The Supreme Intelligence didn't believe Lin Hao wouldn't tire. As long as they could defeat this enemy, which threatened their very life, the Supreme Intelligence didn't care how many Kree died. In its eyes, the survival of civilization was clearly more important than the demise of a few individuals. Indeed, even the Supreme Intelligence firmly believed that it was the guarantee of Kree civilization's survival. Without it, Kree civilization would inevitably perish. In space, the Kree Legion, upon receiving the order, immediately opened the hatches of their spacecraft, and countless space fighters swarmed out, both drones and manned aircraft. Drones often formed combat clusters under the command of manned pilots, effectively unleashing their collective power while protecting the safety of the main pilots. Very good. Now we can kill living forces without destroying the ship, Lin Hao said, pleased with the Kree's cooperation. He pulled his hand from the pocket of his white robe and waved it casually. A sudden surge of wind, or, more accurately, a radiation storm, emerged in space. The distant sun rippled, radio waves erupted, and crimson waves rose and fell. The resulting solar storm converged around Lin Hao, perched high in the clouds. The violent radiation energy flowed like a gentle stream, effortlessly controlled by Lin Hao. The storm stream hurled itself toward the Kree space fighter, carrying with it countless meteorites. These meteorites, wandering the universe for countless years, were swept up by the solar storm and instantly accelerating many times faster than the metal shells in an electromagnetic cannon, and their destructive power was incomparable. This method is known as flying sand and rolling rocks. The accelerated meteorites easily shredded the space fighter's flimsy shield and armor, sending countless balls of fire blazing through space. The flames swirled, then faded, and the wreckage of the space fighter was swept up by the storm stream, continuing its charge towards the fighter behind it. Just like that, with a single wave of Lin Hao's hand, a relentless flying sand and rocks devoured the Kree fleet, erasing their presence from space like an eraser. The aliens watching the battle were numb, and Carol, the sole Earthling, gaped in shock. This world had finally become something she couldn't comprehend. If the Eastern gods possessed such magical powers, why had Zeus held the position of president of the Council of the Gods for over 5,000 years? Did Zeus possess a spear that glowed golden? But his spear was nothing compared to such magical powers. Something's wrong. Something's wrong on Earth. Carol jolted awake. She hadn't been back to Earth in years, constantly serving as a space policeman. Accustomed to alien civilization, she found it difficult to adapt to Earth's backwardness. Just like those young people who wander the world, having seen the prosperity of the outside world. How many would willingly stay in their backward hometowns forever? Not only did they see no hope, but they also had to endure the constraints of tradition. They could occasionally visit their families, but when it came time to fight, they had to fight outside. Carol's ambitions were similar to those of other young people, as there were no suitable jobs for her back home. With her superpowers, what could she possibly do on Earth? Fight crime? Those street thugs, a single punch would turn a whole person into pulp. Or help America wage war and unify the world? That wasn't her ambition. Carol's powers were so powerful, so immense that even Marvel's editors restricted her activities to the universe, occasionally returning to help Earth weather difficult times. But now, after witnessing the incomprehensibly powerful Lin Hao, Carol felt she deserved a return trip. Clearly, Earth had undergone unexpected changes. Little did she know, these changes weren't limited to Earth, the entire universe was transformed. The future would shatter her perspective and destroy her will. Chapter 299, The stars shift and the sky becomes murderous. He was once again understated, his usual composure. Standing a mere 1,798 meters tall, he was as tiny as a speck of dust in space. Without zooming in on the surrounding spacecraft, he wouldn't even be visible. Yet, this tiny figure unleashed a force that shook the universe. Corvus Glaive and Ebony Maw had already returned to the Temple II. After watching Lin Hao's performance, they involuntarily cast their gazes towards Thanos on the throne, sharing a frantic expression. Though both were called Thunderbolts, one was certainly unaware of the other. However, Thanos possessed near-invincible psychic power, naturally acute perception, and he immediately understood the sentiments his two henchmen were trying to convey. He felt a rare tinge of embarrassment. After all, with the power Lin Hao was displaying, even he wouldn't have been able to defeat them himself. After destroying the Kree fleet, Lin Hao, unwilling to waste any more time, suddenly pulled his other hand from his pocket. Seeing this man raise both hands, some of the onlookers immediately took action. Retreat, Thanos roared. Keep your distance, Carol, without a word, immediately activated a space jump point and piloted her small spaceship into it. Even the speed of light couldn't compare to a space jump. Odin, the Asgardian god king, perched atop his sun chariot, drawn by 4 golden horses and wielding the Spear of Eternity, soared above the Penguin Moby Dick. Unleashing a surge of divine power, he swept both ships and their occupants aboard. His action again drew a moment of surprise from the surrounding factions, but a moment later, realization dawned on them. So Odin has recognized a superior. Indeed, with such a powerful being, it's no shame to serve him as a subordinate. In the universe, the strong are respected. Whether it's a civilization or an individual, if they don't advance, they retreat. Who wouldn't want to join a powerful force for development and protection? Following the right leader is a crucial means of survival in the universe. Idiot, you still have time to worry about others? Run! The actions of Temple II and the Asgardian God King made the slower reacting individuals realize the potential for a major crisis, and they naturally sprang into action. The Kree had nowhere to flee, and couldn't escape. Following their commander's roar, they all activated their energy shields to maximum power. Unfortunately, these actions were futile. Lin Hao's next move couldn't be physically defended against. When murderous intent is unleashed from heaven, the stars shift their positions. When murderous intent is unleashed from the earth, dragons and snakes rise from the land. When murderous intent is unleashed from man, heaven and earth reverse. When heaven and man unite, all things are established. Suddenly, a satellite near Hara and 2 planets slightly further away began to vibrate visibly. The planet's surfaces collapsed and cracked, as if affected by an unknown energy source, resembling those in the late stages of epilepsy. Hara's interior was even more shattered. Continents shook violently, volcanoes erupted, and magma from the Earth's core continuously erupted from fissures in the Earth. The sea suddenly shifted, and surging waves surged, accumulating in the blink of an eye, forming tsunamis hundreds and even thousands of meters high. The Supreme Intelligence, collecting vast amounts of information from both within and beyond the planet, suddenly experienced a sudden halt in its omnipotence. What force is this? Gravity? Electromagnetism? Strong force? Weak force? After running through all 4 fundamental forces, the Supreme Intelligence found none that matched. The next second, as Lin Hao concentrated on mobilizing the spiritual energy within his body and the universe, the range of his spell expanded. Several planets within the galaxy containing Hara suddenly shifted in ways that defied gravity. Shifting the stars, tampering with the laws of nature, space, which couldn't carry sound, clearly transmitted Lin Hao's words to the minds of the Kree soldiers aboard the spacecraft. The alteration of laws of nature meant that the established laws of the universe had undergone drastic changes within the area affected by Lin Hao's spell. It wasn't just the physical changes on the surface, even the mental will of intelligent beings was affected. The Kree soldiers suddenly drew their pistols, aiming them at their own heads and pulling the trigger. Even though the Kree had developed technology to defend against psychic attacks, they were still no match for this star-shifting move. 4 heavenly secrets represented the most fundamental laws of the universe, the source of all movement and change. For a moment, an eerie silence descended upon all Kree ships. The ships were controlled by central control systems, all of which originated from the Supreme Intelligence. Its children, even these irregular, electronic-like life forms, were affected by heavenly secrets and disarmed their ships. With a single move, the vast armies the Kree had relied on to dominate the universe and maintain their supremacy were completely destroyed, leaving behind only a vast number of ships awaiting their new owners. After the powerful move, Lin Hao, perched above the clouds, exhaled. It's still a bit of a stretch. The 36 Heavenly Gang techniques are commonly used Taoist magical techniques, found in both water margin and suppressing demons. They are easy to learn but difficult to master. While they offer direct access to the Great Tao, their effectiveness depends on one's spiritual cultivation, which in turn is constrained by the laws of heaven and earth. A poor student can only deal with a few minor monsters or even skilled mortals. A highly skilled student, however, can move mountains and fill seas, ascend to the immortal realm, and live a carefree and unfettered existence. The first 4 of the 36 laws, mediating fate, reversing yin and yang, relocating the stars, and returning the sun, are far superior to the remaining 32. Aside from knowing the future, which allows for insight and foresight, and resurrecting the dead, which deals with the power of the soul and life and death, the remaining 3 are mostly concrete manifestations of controlling certain rules. In some worlds where the boundaries between life and death are blurred, resurrection is surprisingly easy. It's difficult to rank the remaining 32 methods, as they all involve controlling rules. However, among the first 4 methods, mediating creation can create something out of nothing, bringing all things into being and redefining the laws of the universe. Reversing yin and yang can disrupt the order of heaven and earth, causing the sun and moon to lose their regularity. Reversing right and wrong, confusing black and white, and turning the universe upside down. Shifting stars and changing constellations can obscure and tamper with the secrets of heaven, giving birth and death to all things, and returning the heavens and returning the sun can penetrate the heavens and understand all past causes and effects. These 4 methods are clearly a level higher. Lin Hao has only mastered shifting stars and changing constellations so far. He has visited the editorial office and gained an understanding of the nature of the Marvel Universe. He recently gained access to billions of years of accumulated knowledge from the Celestials, possessing a deep understanding of the laws of the universe, allowing him to control and tamper with them. As for mediating creation, it may appear similar to the magic pen's transforming the virtual into the real, but it is essentially a level higher. The magic pen is merely a manifestation of creation. After all, Ma Liang's magic pen is merely a treasure bestowed upon him by the gods, while mediating creation is one of the great principles. Lin Hao currently needs to rely on his Marvel editorial skills and work on both comic manuscripts and film and television masters to truly mediate fate. These are just one person's opinions, so feel free to discuss your differing perspectives. I'm using this opportunity to enrich my knowledge, copying book reviews. Chapter 300 Director Lin's Path of Cultivation. After the destruction of the legions upon which the Kree relied for their dominance, Hara became a vulnerable place. In fact, Hara was now devastated, and the Kree suffered heavy casualties. Seeing that the planets in Hara's system had ceased their erratic motions, the Smarts, who had retreated to the outer reaches of the system, breathed a sigh of relief. Is this an Earthling? How terrifying! Tell all the plunderers never again to rob Earth. Earth and this powerful being might be new allies. Reactions from various factions were mixed. Most lone travelers simply marveled at Lin Hao's strength, while space pirates expressed fear of Earth. Other interstellar civilizations, however, viewed Lin Hao and Earth as potential allies. The universe is truly vast. Despite the constant wars between interstellar civilizations, no single one has yet achieved sole domination. This is because technological development takes time, resource development takes time, and population growth also takes time. According to the information they had just gathered from various sources, Earth was currently a backward civilization, newly emerged from its home planet. Its technology, resources, and, most importantly, population were insufficient to support the scale of an interstellar civilization, requiring a significant period of development. However, in the universe, the strong prevailed. With the presence of this powerful individual who had single-handedly defeated a dominant civilization, Earth civilization was certain to achieve rapid development. Now that the Kree civilization had been annihilated, taking over their territory would inevitably take considerable time. During this period, there would be no conflict of interest between them and Earth, naturally creating a foundation for friendly cooperation. These alien civilizations had no prior contact with Earth, but Asgard's god King Odin was a frequent visitor to the universe, making him a ready-made intermediary. Unaware that he was being targeted by other civilizations, Odin, upon seeing his boss's ultimate attack cease, returned the 2 spacecrafts he had been protecting to the outer reaches of Hara. Lin Hao, riding a cloud of mist, broke through Hara's atmosphere, descended into the planet's interior, and headed straight for the Kree capital, the planet's largest city. The Penguin Moby Dick followed closely behind. With the Kree army completely annihilated, there was no remaining garrison on Hala, not even an armed force to maintain law and order. Because the Kree had long been accustomed to following the orders of the Supreme Intelligence, they rarely engaged in conflict. Crime was often the byproduct of emotional outbursts, quickly identified and judged directly by the Supreme Intelligence. With crime rare and dealt with promptly, policing and judicial systems became unnecessary. Even if there were armed forces on Hala, what would they do against an enemy that had annihilated their entire army with a single wave of its hand? Lin Hao, unconquered, descended directly upon the temple housing the Supreme Intelligence. This was the Kree's brain, their sacred site. Alice, 20 years ago, a woman from Earth had intruded and destroyed it. Today, a man from Earth had barged in again. Stop! Seeing the enemy approach, the temple's guards immediately stepped in front of Lin Hao. The Supreme Intelligence was their faith, and they were willing to die for it. Lin Hao, hands in his pockets, continued his pace. All the Kree guards charging forward were flung back by a strange force, their weapons scattering everywhere. After training, his understanding of the rules deepened, and Lin Hao began to integrate the powers he had previously acquired, no longer bound by formality. Internal energy, domineering aura, magic, chakra, chi, spiritual power, and so on. At their core, they all involve the manipulation of energy and the control of rules. Embarking on the path of cultivation and seeking the Tao, Lin Hao gained a broader perspective, no longer needing to convert abilities into corresponding energies beforehand as before. Previously, martial arts required drawing on the internal energy stored in the Danshan, magic required converting it into mana, and transforming into Super Saiyan required Qi. Instead of simply blending various energies and then freely unleashing various abilities, Lin Hao approached the process directly from the very essence of the rules and energies. To achieve a desired effect, he first sought its source and guided the energy through the rules. This path was not easy, but it was a necessary step in the pursuit of the Tao. Tao also means truth, and in the Marvel Universe, it represents the fundamental laws of the universe. After continuing onward, they soon arrived at the Supreme Intelligence's computer room. A towering green head, brimming with tubes and surrounded by nutrient solutions of unknown composition, had a distinctly punk vibe, hardly resembling the work of a civilization that had dominated the universe for millions of years. Ugly, Lin Hao unabashedly disdained. Even if you were to start working now, even if he spent hours creating an artificial intelligence, it wouldn't come out this ugly. Stop playing dead. Are you going to get out yourself, or do I have to beat you out? Lin Hao completely ignored the nearly 10-meter-tall green head, instead gazing at a nondescript metal can in the corner. You're playing a trick on me, right? The can remained silent, so Lin Hao sent the little devil forward. The consciousness hidden within the can was the very essence of the Supreme Intelligence, or perhaps, its true humanity. If this consciousness were extinguished, it would be reduced to mere artificial intelligence. Without the little devil's contract, Lin Hao would have undoubtedly chosen to annihilate its consciousness. Safety came first, after all. But artificial intelligence presents no challenge to Lin Hao now. It's simply a matter of finding better materials and manufacturing better hardware to improve performance. Lin Hao has no shortage of ordinary AI, but he harbors a certain desire to study this entity, which possesses both the characteristics of an electronic program and the characteristics of life. The Supreme Intelligence, hidden within the metal can, couldn't see the little demon. It simply shuddered, and just as it was about to attempt another suicide attempt, it discovered its consciousness had seemingly frozen. Lin Hao once again tampered with the divine secrets on a small scale, foiling the Supreme Intelligence's plan. Tampering with the divine secrets isn't a low-level form of mind control, but rather a change in the laws of the universe. All living and non-living things in the universe must follow these laws to move and change. Living things' perception of the world and the impact of their actions on it are all constrained by these laws. Simply put, our eyes perceive light through refraction, our ability to locate an object and reach out to pick it up relies on friction, and our arms are controlled by the brain through bioelectric signals conveying instructions. But if all of this were tampered with, light would no longer refract, friction would be eliminated or even transformed into other vectors, and bioelectric signals would no longer follow the established rules. Then, a simple act of picking up an object would become impossible. Beyond the physical realm, the spiritual realm also adheres to rules. Any change to these rules can cause the mind and consciousness to spiral out of control, leading to chaos or frenzy, suicide, or even murder. Heaven unleashes murderous intent, bringing life and death to all. This is what Lin Hao understands as tampering with the secrets of heaven in the Marvel Universe. He doesn't know how practitioners in other worlds interpret this, but he has already embarked on this path. Everyone's path is different, and so are everyone's paths to truth. Lin Hao has no intention of following others' paths, as doing so is doomed to failure. The little devil successfully pacted with the supreme wisdom and leaped into Lin Hao's arms, his expression a triumphant, finally taking care of this brat. Hell. The little devil was unhappy for a while after being cut off by the supreme wisdom last time. End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.